Hey Marcus, how are you?
Good, Wayne. How are you?
Fantastic. I'm feeling so refreshed after dinner, after more napping time. So good
Sure.
to go. And it's great to have you here. Where exactly are you located? Give us your location. Give us, exactly what you're up to this week as well.
Okay. Well, I am in Nashville, Tennessee, which is right in the middle of the United States. It's still dark outside. The sun is just coming up here out my window. And I today am actually doing a podcast audio lab workshop online virtually talking about audio interfaces. So I'm getting ready for that here in a few hours as well. But I produce
Fantastic.
podcasts every
Fantastic.
day. I do editing, I do recording for clients. I also work with my wife. I do websites and marketing with her, and we're doing workshops with her as well. So lots of online content.
I have so many burning questions about interfaces because it's something that I'm trying to figure it out myself as well. I think the community as well, especially those who have recently became early adopters and have actually dived into Clubhouse and trying to figure out exactly how to bring audio in and bring audio out. So maybe you can walk us through that. And that's the first top of the mind question that I have for you.
Yeah, I get
Please
that
start
question a
first.
lot, and it's tricky because with Clubhouse, and I think it's also one of the reasons why it's still only on the iPhone is they want to try to prevent people from recording. And I'm just postulating this. I don't know for sure, but I figure that in an effort to do that, there's probably two different protocols in the iPhone. One for using an audio interface for like using a recording app or a streaming app or a video app, and then I'm pretty sure that there's a second protocol for the actual phone calls because I can't use my any of my audio interfaces to actually make phone calls. And so it's the same thing with Clubhouse. As soon I can listen, if I join a room and listen, I can hear it through my audio interface. But as soon as I join the conversation or host a room or get up on stage and my microphone is activated, it switches and now my audio interface shuts off. So I think they're using that telephone protocol just to prevent people from recording. So what you can do is if you have a Rodecaster Pro or one of the new Zoom PodTrack P4 interfaces that has a phone connection that has a TRRS connection or Bluetooth, but the Bluetooth sounds terrible. So I'd recommend going the hardwire. Then you can use that connection as a phone device. So it sees your phone thinks your audio interface is just like a headset that you would plug in, like the ear pods. And so then you can use that to talk and listen. I
This is so awesome.
Yeah, so I have this fancy professional box that does the same thing because I don't have a Rodecaster Pro, I don't have a Zoom PodTrack, but this is Adapter 2. It's $150 I think I paid for this, but it
Let's zoom in
takes
on that. Yeah. Show
okay.
it to us on a screen again. That's a
So
pro, yeah?
yeah, it's a little box and it basically has some inputs where you can take the phone and I use the adapter to Lightning to TRRS, so so it has the left and right stereo
Three stripe.
headphones, and then and then it's got the additional stripe for the microphone, and so I plug that into my Lightning connector, and then this has a input and output to go to my audio interface, so I just plug it in like a microphone, and then I can hear it in my headphones.
Beautiful. And this has been something that, I've been trying to figure out myself. I do have a Rodecaster Pro.
Yeah,
I'm just trying to figure out because I have an older version of the iPad Pro, which comes with the 3.5 jack. I think it's called
yeah,
RCA, right? Yeah. So I'm actually, using a cable that doesn't have three stripes. So I think that's a problem. Yeah.
right.
I'm connecting it to this RCA jack, going into the back of the Rodecaster Pro with that RCA in as well. So I can actually record conversations on Clubhouse, but I
Right.
can't actually bring audio into Clubhouse. So how do we overcome that?
Well, all you need to get is a TRRS to TRRS eighth-inch cable and plug it into the iPad and then plug it into that phone jack in the back of the Rodecaster Pro. And then you'll be able to send your voice to through that phone input in the Rodecaster.
So which means that I can also use my pod mic that is connected to my Rodecaster Pro, and whatever that I speak into the mic goes to the Rodecaster Pro, and from that goes into the iPad in, right?
Exactly.
Then how about the music that I'm going to bring in? Let's say I'm going to play some maybe mix tape or a playlist, and that playlist is actually connected to my Rodecaster Pro through another source, maybe a CD player, yeah? So if I'm going to connect to the back of the Rodecaster Pro as well, can I actually play a CD? And does the music goes right into the action in Clubhouse?
Yes, what you could do is actually use two of the microphone inputs in that. And I think I don't have a Rodecaster Pro, so I'm not sure, but if you can pan them left and right, you could get stereo audio. So you'd have to come out of the CD player or whatever into XLR into the back of the Rodecaster, and then you could bring those two faders up for stereo for your music. You could also load the songs into the touchpads on the Rodecaster Pro, so you could have a full song on there using the software, so you could use that, and that would also play through that phone connection.
And this is like opening up so many possibilities. So I have like 8 magical, or should I say 8 colored squares, right, on my Rodecaster Pro.
Right.
So each square I can actually store either a podcast show or a snippet or even a piece of music, right?
Exactly.
Now I know how they're actually doing DJ sessions in Clubhouse. I'm wondering, how did they do that, you know? And what I actually lack right now is just one piece of gear, which is basically a hardwire, a TRS cable. That's all I need to
That's
actually.
all you need. Yeah.
Fantastic. You're the expert. You're the brains. And that's why you're on this festival, because you are here to enlighten us and, you know, bring us a step closer to all these gear setup issues that we all face. I think podcasting, you know, the easiest thing is actually to talk, I think. The hardest thing is to actually get everything set up so that you're ready to go, ready to press record, ready to go live as well. So you've been doing that for years, and I understand with your wife as well, right? So tell us, you know, the story behind Mixters Media. Tell us, you know, your career, how you navigated in the beginning, and get involved in audio engineering.
Yeah, so I've been making noise since I was 14 years old. I'm 46 now, so more than 3 decades. And I've, for some reason, always been fascinated with sound. I think it's because my father was a musician and he was always playing the piano in the house. Maybe like just having that sound going all the time while I was playing was part of it. But I got involved just when my dad worked at a church and he needed a sound person, and I was always there because I was his son. So I just like, well, I'll go back there and figure out the soundboard. So I started doing that from a young age. And then when I got to college, I'm like, yeah, I know how to use that. And I just start helping set things up for events. Then I ended up running sound for the music school because the college program I went to had a commercial music program where they would have, you know, basically performances, multiple performances every week by the students, like concerts, basically. So I'd run sound for those. Then I got a call from someone to help out with a show locally, a professional show, helping to run sound for that. And he liked working with me. And before I knew it, I was going out touring with bands. And I spent 10 years touring with bands, running sound, doing live sound. I got tired of traveling, and so then I stopped touring and started doing studio installations. So I did here in Nashville, we have thousands and thousands of recording studios, professional recording studios for music. And so I do soldering, I do, you know, I do some acoustic treatment. I've made these panels that are behind me, but I'm not an expert at that. Soldering is my main thing. Signal flow, you know, what devices to get, where to set up in the room, that sort of thing, what microphones you need. And then after doing that for a little while, I just stopped working in music because my wife started a company with me called Mixters Media. She did publicity for a record label, and she didn't want to work at the record label anymore, so she started doing it independently. She then switched to social media, and it just exploded. So now she's a social media expert, and I've helped her with that business. I build websites in support of that. I help create media content, video, audio, you know, whatever. And so that's kind of my main job. And then this podcasting work came about because one of our clients needed a podcast. I'm like, hey, I know audio. I'll give it a shot. And so about 5 years ago, I did this podcast called Two Bobs, and it's a business podcast by a couple of friends of mine, and they're consultants, so all of their business people just started asking me, "Hey, I need a podcast too. This podcast sounds great." Or they asked them, who does your podcast? It sounds amazing. So they would refer me, and so I just started getting work that way, and it just kind of snowballed from there. And I'm making a name for myself as kind of an elevated audio quality. I charge more than most people do because I'm not just pressing record and then pushing it off on Anchor. I actually edit things very precisely. I use my music training to mix it using EQ and compression and audio plugins. I have quite the setup here. It's like a mini recording studio. So I've got my speakers, and I've got a hardware controller for my EQ and compression and all that stuff by Softtube. I've got my video switcher here. And I'm getting into live streaming now because of the pandemic. So that the video I've always done video, but audio is my passion. And so now I'm just kind of getting more into the video stuff now that more people are doing these kind of events. So
I love your setup. It looks amazing. I think from what I observe as well, right, you have so many different angles. So obviously you have an A10 switcher, right?
Yes, A10 Mini Pro. Yep.
Is there some, or do you actually recommend this gear or this equipment for every podcaster out there? Is it something that, every podcast should always, or maybe just consider, for the time that we're living in, right? Everyone's also live streaming their shows, recording their shows. It's not just audio, right? So the game has actually leveled up, and you're obviously leveling up by having all this set up. Do you think that this piece of equipment can actually be a crucial element in their show production?
I think so, because I've gotten more work now with video, just like with the podcast, where people are like, wow, this sounds amazing. Who does this podcast? When I get on even just a Zoom call, I use this setup, and everybody's like, wow, your camera looks amazing. And even before I got this fancy camera set up, for video, the main thing you asked, what's something that people can get is make sure you have good lighting. So you want to get a professional light, even if it's just a ring light that a lot of people are getting. But I like these diffusers. I have a soft box that has like a piece of fabric over it that diffuses the light to make it soft.
Can we see it?
It's kind of hard for me to move my stuff.
Challenging.
Move my cameras. Yeah, because it's out of the frame. But
that's fine, yeah. I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Maybe next time, yeah. I'll tell you
right. But you can just get a desk mount with an LED light. You can get them for $50 US, something like that. But if it has some kind of diffusion, the ring lights have a particular look because they put a circle on your eyes, which is kind of nice. But some people don't like it because they say it makes you look like an alien. But the diffusion from
I've been
a softbox,
avoiding getting a ring light until for this festival. Finally, because somebody commented that it looks too dark. So okay, get a ring light. But now I have two rings in my eyes.
Right. And then the other thing is positioning. So you don't want it directly in front of you. You want it kind of off to the side a little bit so you get this kind of nice cinematic shadow look instead of just the full. Yeah. So, and then you also want to have an interesting background. So, having it lit, I have that little lamp back there just to kind of light up my little background.
Well lit at this moment, or it looks terrible?
It looks fine. It looks deep. It looks like, is it a hallway or is that your living room?
It's a living room, yeah. It's also a kitchen. It's a very small one-bedder apartment, yeah.
Big city living.
Exactly. So yeah, I think you have already given us so many valuable, value bombs. And of course, I want to go back to the Clubhouse question because I think that I see you there quite a lot. Of course, I followed you. And I think one of the reasons why we are now having this opportunity to speak, face to face or a bit virtually is because I found you on Clubhouse, and Clubhouse has opened up so many, I would say, possibilities, opportunities, and collaborative projects that we can all embark on together, right? So you're just one very good case in point, and you're on the festival because when I click on, I think I joined your room. I think you were hosting a nightly session, if I'm not wrong, about audio engineering, and ventured in. And I saw that you're moderating and you speak really well. And I click on your Instagram, voila, you have such a, it's like you completely nailed your Instagram as well. Of course, your website looked great as well. So immediately I was like, oh, I must get this guy to the festival and educate us.
Well, thank you. I
What is your
appreciate
take
that.
about Clubhouse so far? As in, are you seeing more action there than in other channels previously?
It's yes, right now I think so. And I think part of that is because it's so new and so it's easy for a lot of people to just discover new voices, whereas like Twitter is actually the main place I spend my time on social media. I have the Instagram account, but I don't update it enough. I need to update it more. But you know, Twitter, there's just so much stuff going on. And the way Clubhouse, especially because you follow specific people and there's you're not inundated by, you know, too many people yet because it's still so new. I don't know. It just seems like a lot of people are getting more engagement. The audio only aspect of it is different because so much of social media is visual, and that is amazing to me because audio is my passion. And I feel like as human beings, there's something about the human voice, especially when you can't see somebody, it makes you really tune in on their voice and the inflections and stuff. Because, you know, communication is visual and sound and smell and, you know, all that sort of stuff, all the senses. But when you have just one sense that you're focused on, it makes it different, and it makes you tune in. I don't know. It feels like they're in my head when they're talking to me.
Exactly, 100%. And next Clubhouse, question is about what we're doing right now. This is stream on StreamYard, obviously. So how do I bring this audio into Clubhouse? Is it the same setup that you just described to me earlier on with my first question?
Yes. If you run it through your Rodecaster, if you're outputting it from your Rodecaster, you can send it from your phone. And so whatever's running through that, you can just send it live through.
So basically, my laptop has a 3.5mm RCA jack as well. Just plug that to the back, right?
Exactly.
I've always been wondering about that because I think one of the things about doing live streaming, right? The carbon footprint is really, really high. I think I read an article somewhere that it's about 96% more than what you could probably, just make do with an audio broadcast or a non-video. It's just like people are zooming these days and turning the camera off because they just don't want to consume, needlessly all this power and consumption, right? So I'm thinking of doing a festival where, it's got to be just Clubhouse only and no more video. And
That's
no more, waiting resources. Of course, we don't have to turn on the lights, and we can basically do the whole summit lying down on a bed and even completely naked. Who cares, right?
That's right.
So, like, do you have this intention? Like, do you do a lot of live streaming, or you're doing more for your clients' projects?
I'm doing more because a lot of my clients, they're either business people that would speak at events and do in-person workshops, and that's how they would make their money, is traveling around the world and doing these kind of things in person. And so now they're having to do it virtually, and they don't have a camera, they don't have a microphone. They might have a microphone, but they don't know how to hook it up to, video streaming. And the other people that I've been working with are musicians as well, especially being here in Nashville, that's Music City, USA. They're having to do their performances online now. And, touring is the best way musicians make money. So doing these virtual events has become kind of, my son is getting ready to start school here in a few minutes, and he's doing it via Zoom. So even the teachers, I can help them if I needed to, if they could afford to pay me. So...
This is great. And of course, you mentioned about how you started your career, right? So in the beginning, do you need to hustle, a lot like, most people do just, to build a resume. And of course, like building a resume for work is what everybody, especially those who are climbing corporate ladders are interested in, right? So did you have to hustle in the beginning as well?
I did. And I feel like I set myself apart because of my initiative. I took initiative. At this event that I was helping out at, if I saw something that needed to be done, I got it done. And I was the other big factor that I hear all the time here in the music community, especially, is that even if you're really, really good at what you do, if you're awkward to be around, if you're not fun to be around, then you're probably not going to get hired back. So that's part of it too, is making sure that you're a personable human and that you treat others respectfully, you engage with them, you're positive, and you get stuff done. That's the other thing. And then also, at this stage of my career especially, making sure that whatever I do is the highest quality possible. I don't half-ass anything. And it sometimes drives my wife nuts, like even loading the dishwasher. I'm like doing the best I can. So that's the other thing. And I just got referred another job yesterday that I'm going to have a phone call next week with another musician because this former client of mine enjoyed working with me so much and they can't work with me anymore. So they're like, hey, you need to work with Marcus.
These are the best word of mouth and referrals, right? So
Yes.
we're going to maybe ask you 3 questions that I always love to ask audio engineers, especially someone with a background. How do podcasters make their podcast sound better? That's number 1. Number 2, how do you EQ a podcast? And number 3, what are the best microphones for a podcast?
Okay. So number 1, the biggest problem that I hear in podcasting is that people are too far away from their microphone. And when you're this far away, it may sound okay to you in the headphones, but if I have a semi-treated room here with some acoustic panels, but there's a window, I've got my kid in the next room, there's airplanes going overhead. If the closer I get to the microphone, the more it's going to pick up of my voice and the less it's going to pick up of my environment, especially if you don't have a room that's treated like mine. You're going to pick up the reflections of your voice bouncing all around the room, and that's what makes that echoey sound. So the closer you can get to the microphone, the better, especially these dynamic mics. They're made for being very, very close. If you have a condenser microphone, which I've got one over there on the shelf, you still need to be a little further away because it can get really, really bass heavy. But this one is actually made to be super close. Like inside, if you take the windscreen off, you can see the element it's a couple inches away from the end. So it's actually made to be really, really close. So if you hear people saying be 2 to 3 inches away from the microphone, I would be 1 to 2 inches away from the microphone, if you have a dynamic especially. So the second one with the EQ, I use a combination of EQ and compression. Compression is also important, and most any software usually has it. But with the EQ, what I'll do is I'll try to find one that has the graph on it that you can see the waveform, and you can see some of the parts that are sticking up. And the bumps on the left are the lower parts of your voice, and the bumps on the right are the higher part of your voice. And I can bump up each filter and kind of hear the nasty sounds, and then I'll cut that back down. So I'll kind of push it up at first to really accentuate the bad sounds, and then kind of move it around, and then I'll pull it down. And I'm going to be doing a podcast audio lab on EQ soon. So if you want to follow me on social media and at meonlylouder.com, you can join me for that, and I'll do a screen share and show you how I do it. And then as far as the microphones, this is my favorite microphone, the Shure SM7B. It sounds great on my voice. I have the high boost on because I like the clarity, and I have such a boomy voice. I need it. But if you're just starting out, this is my second favorite microphone. It's the Samson Q2U. It's also dynamic, and it's both USB and XLR. So you can use it just by yourself, plugging straight in via USB when you start out. It's only $60 US or $70 US, depending on how much it costs at the time. I think I got this one for $60, but I think they're up to $70 now because everybody's streaming. But it just sounds really good for the money. For $60, $70, and it comes with a little stand. I've upgraded the stand to a little heftier one. It comes with a little flimsier one, but it still works. And it comes with the windscreen as well. And it just for the money, you can't beat it. This one is $400. This one's $70. So. But in between, Shure just came out with the MV7, and it's also XLR and USB, and it comes with software that allows you to EQ and compress. and it's really, really hard to make this microphone sound bad. It looks a lot like the SM7B. It sounds not quite as good, but it's still very, very, very good. Especially it's $250 US.
These are all great gear, and of course, you mentioned about lots of stuff that are actually flying off the shelves and they are sold out, right?
Yes.
I recently talked to the supplier of Rodecaster Pro, right? It's actually out of stock in Singapore. So it's amazing.
Wow. So you just walk down the street and grab one.
You should stockpile it just like toilet paper.
Right.
But who would have expected these, happening? Of course, the pandemic has not stopped. It hasn't left us yet. So it's going to continue for a while. So people are going to find out ways to be more active at home, not just watching Netflix and resting on their bums, right? And I think doing podcasting is a great way to see action. It's a great way to connect with the universe and meet interesting people like you. And, I would have never had this opportunity if not for the Clubhouse app, which I think they are currently valued at $1 billion. What's your opinion?
Right.
Is this overpriced or underpriced?
The whole market valuation, I don't understand it. So I don't know. I mean, what I do understand is that a lot of people are responding well to it. And so I guess people are wanting to just jump in and take advantage of that and try to make money from it. But I'm just focusing on the fact that I can connect with other people. And that's what matters to me. And who knows how long this, if it's going to keep going up and up and up, or if it's just going to kind of fizzle out. I think because podcasting is also so popular right now that just audio in general is getting people's attention. So I don't see Clubhouse failing anytime soon. I think it's going to continue to grow.
And Twitter Spaces as well, right? Basically doing the same thing, but
exactly.
Making it Android available as well. I think they have that unique advantage as well. But people are loving Clubhouse because I think they're the first, and it's available in Asia already. Twitter Spaces are not even available in Asia. So I think...
Really? Okay.
Yeah. And there was a podcaster who is very, close to VCs and people of that sort, right? And his opinion is that the valuation is too low. It's actually worth 100 billion. So I'm astounded when this sort of price valuations is being floated around. For me, I don't really care about valuation. I don't buy shares. I don't invest in companies. For me, it's just like what works for us right now at this day and age, right? And what's here today may be gone tomorrow. So it could be a trend, it could be a fad, but whatever the founders are getting, for their efforts, and I've tuned into their, the townhouse discussions before. They sound like really, great people and with great intent. So they have built this for us to get closer to the universe and allow me to actually talk to you and get to know a new friend. So I really appreciate the Clubhouse people for doing what they do, and whatever awards that they get along the way, I think they fully deserve it.
Yes, absolutely. My favorite part is just meeting new people like you, and I've met so many great people on Clubhouse. I love it.
I've already followed you there, so I'm going to urge our community members to also follow you there. And maybe can you tell us your Instagram handle? That's the best way to reach you. I think I reached out to you on Instagram DMs as well. So
yes,
let's put it on the screen.
Yeah, it's Me Only Louder. And that's my website as well, meonlylouder.com. And I got that from a friend of mine, Vance Powell, who said he would test the sound system every day and EQ it. And then when he was done, he would say, sounds like Me Only Louder.
Fantastic. It's so easy to remember. And I think if you do SEO, right, in terms of the price for building this keyword is very low.
Right, exactly.
It's great. I think you nailed it. And, you brought so much value bombs on this particular show. Hope to have you back again for our monthly, PodFest Asia event. So next month, maybe we'll talk about some other topics that is not Clubhouse. Maybe we'll talk more about more cool stuff, more audio gear, maybe lighting as well. I think your lighting knowledge is way advanced than all of us right here in Singapore. So you're going to tap on your knowledge and your wisdom and your experience, yeah?
I'd love to. I'm always happy to share.
Any last message for our viewers, audience who are tuning in live or replaying this on a smart speaker, later on during a podcast replay? Yeah,
just start where you're at with whatever you have. Do the best you can with what you have, and learn as you go. It's always a process. You have to keep practicing, keep doing, and keep developing, and you'll get there.
Thank you so much, Marcus. Thank you for your time. I'll see you very soon, my friend. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye. So follow Marcus. Let me point it the right way. Me Only Louder. That's his Instagram handle and his website as well. So I wanted to use this opportunity to thank our sponsors, sponsor members, we call them. Sounds profitable. Make sure you subscribe to his newsletter and find out about the world of ad tech and many other interesting topics that I think every podcaster should actually familiarize themselves with. It's not just, gear, audio setup, equipment, or conversations or content that you should worry about, or maybe to study, but also the world of ad tech, where advertisements, right, is basically a very good way to drive monetization models and strategies. So there is a huge world out there regarding ad tech. And it's through this newsletter that I'm able to actually find out more about interesting companies like True Native Advertising, for example. Shout out to Heather Osgood, Matchcast, Jamie Ng, and of course, many other great companies and partners in the field like Nielsen. That's another one that's also we welcome on board as our sponsor member, Nielsen Media. So I'm not doing a really good job and doing shout outs. So I want to make sure that next time, can actually fully recognize our sponsor members either during the show, in our newsletter, or on our social posts. So without further ado, let's invite our next special guest. It's actually a late speaker reveal. We only confirmed her appearance on the festival, I think just a couple of hours ago, but it's always a pleasure to have new faces and appearing on our screen, right? And it's a beautiful lady by the name of Yashika. Hi, how are you?
I'm well. How are you? Thank you, Wayne.
You set up your mic in double quick time because half an hour ago you were still talking to me without a mic, and here you are. Where did you get your mic from?
We are in a podcasting world. You got to do what you got to do, right?
Exactly. Find resources and just masking tape stuff together. That's what podcasters are great at, improvise.
Improvise. So I was like, okay, while Wine is just here around, let me just get this together.
Fantastic. So tell us where you are. Tell us what you do. And of course, Voice of Achievers, right, is something that is really unique. And I think it's really interesting for us to be able to talk to you as well and introduce you to our PodFest Asia community. So tell us the story about Voice of Achievers.
Okay, so I think the story of Voice of Achievers began with me going back a few years when there is this time when all of us experience this stage where there is career confusion. We call it the quarter life crisis nowadays. There's a midlife crisis and then there's the quarter life crisis where there's enough and more confusion around what career choices one should make. There's self-doubt. There's confusion with respect to what are the experiences, what are the skills we need to have, who should one reach out to. So that's when I was like, I sense that there is a gap between the experienced few who have like enormous experience across various diverse fields and the ones who are just starting out, who know, they ultimately end up reaching out to the ones that they possibly know, friends or relatives or friends of friends maybe, but connecting the right people with the experienced few who've already walked that path. So that was the intent behind this. And I was like, so I come with an HR and communications and content background. So the idea began with me wanting to write because I have editorial experience. So I was like, okay, let's just start a blog. But then that's when podcasting was just right up there and fairly new. So I was like, okay, this is the right time to maybe pick up the skill while doing it and also reach out to the youth in ways that they will be listening to the content, because nobody really wants to read with the attention span that they have now. So who wants to read? Even the news that they read is like bite-sized content in a few sentences and you're done. So yes, that's the story. That's the backstory.
Fantastic story. And of course, during this one-to-one conversation with you, I want to ask you a few questions, especially, your superhero stories. I know that you told lots of stories during your interviews with your guests on your show. So tell us maybe from the beginning, what ignited your passion about podcasting in the first place?
I think this possibly goes back to my childhood and perhaps anybody's childhood, where they've heard the grandma's stories. We call it dadi nani ki kahaniyan in Hindi, but the grandma stories, that the moments that we all cherish, where you're in the moment, you're listening to the bedtime stories, and you're sort of creating your own stories in your imagination, because listening provides you that space of imagination and putting in your experiences and your thoughts into that. So that's where this audio storytelling experience or idea came about, because that's how you've grown up listening to audio stories. I think across cultures, possibly, we love listening to bedtime stories, and that puts us to a calm, good night's sleep. So, what's better than listening to people, their experiences, their stories in their own voices?
Brilliant. And of course, I want to also move on to talk about the influencers, right? Because these days, many are saying that podcasters are also the new breed of social media influencers. And recently, I think you posted something on LinkedIn about why the influencer that you follow must provide sources of the information that they share. If not, you need to actually revisit who to follow. So is this something that you do quite consistently, in terms of like really making sure that you are following the right influencers? Can you explain to us why they must always provide sources or information that is there?
I get that. So I think that comes from the idea that once you've possibly had like a brush with academia, and you know the importance and the relevance of research and citing the right sources, that's when you feel that it's so relevant in the culture and the times we live today. Um, we are following pretty much anybody and everybody, and there's so much content available that you really don't know that the people you're following, where is the information coming from? Are they well sourced? Are they able to cite the right sources? Do they know are they making generalizations, or is this based on data? Now, data can be numerical, it can be experiential, it could be all kinds of data, but is there data backing that information, or is it just a perspective? Now, there's that difference between fact and story. So I breathe is a fact, but I'm feeling really good today is my experience. So we really need to be very mindful of, in the times that we are living, that where are these stories coming from? Are they experienced perspectives, and what we should be taking away from those experiences? That's why all the podcasts that go out are strictly experiences of those people. Now, they may be their stories, and they may not be your reality. So there's that difference that one needs to be slightly mindful of or aware of. And of course, the fact that now, if I'm talking to Wine, I know that mine comes from a marketing background. And if I spoke to you about marketing, I know for a fact that there will be hell number of years of experience that help you make those generalizations. So your comments come from experienced and research perspectives, whereas me just fiddling with marketing a little bit and saying that this is what it is, that's not true, right?
100%. And I have to ask you about the followers that, or the influencers that you follow. Are they primarily podcasters, or you have a good mix of social media influencers that you follow?
So one of the very senior people in the storytelling community had told me once that try and get a blend of 5 different people. There's that saying, no, the 5 different people from 5 diverse backgrounds make up who you are or who you would be. So no, not only podcasters, because I come from the HR community. Many people from the HR community, from communications, from academia, from literature, from cinema, from various backgrounds, actually. Just so many different backgrounds, because even the ones that I'm possibly not comfortable with, financial background. My husband comes from a financial background, and I simply don't understand that. But yet that diverse mix brings in the brings in different perspectives and ultimately shapes you into who you are.
So moving away from this social media or social influencers, right, topic, I understand that you interview experienced individuals across diverse fields, all fields that you just mentioned, in order to help the youth navigate career-related challenges, right? So
Right.
your podcast draws on deep motivations, disappointments, gender, culture, literature, and cinema to help to decode career and workplace insights. So, what are some of the biggest wins of doing this podcast, either for yourself as the producer, the host, and also for your listeners? What are the biggest wins for them as well?
I feel that because there is the psychology background, I try and dwell deep into intrinsic motivation. So, in psychology and in fact, in many other management practices, you may have, in fact, managed in marketing as well. There is the Maslow's hierarchy, right? Where you have those 5 stages, and then you ultimately want to reach that flow, the what we call self actualization, and you want to ultimately be satisfied with the kind of work that you're doing, with the life that you're living. So it's like a holistic perspective. You just want to be in the flow of work, in the flow of life. So I think a few of the things that I try and delve into are uh, disappointments. Where are the times when there was self doubt? Where are the times when what are the factors that motivated one, and how does one keep going? There are sometimes artists, there are cartoonists who are doing wonderful work, and there are times when it's challenging to keep up. What do you then do? What drives you then when it may not be truly financial, right? There may be higher motivations than that. There's also so many other things that involve maybe emotional well-being. There is culture, there is diversity, there is gender. So in the workplace, when you're right out of college and just getting into the workplace, it's a complete shift. What you have been surrounded with, and what ultimately ends up happening with you is a complete shift of space, of people actually. So how do you blend in, and do you really need to blend in, or can you still hold your ground while also being in cohesion with everyone else? Are the few things that I try and decode.
Fantastic. And by decoding this, you're providing them answers. And I think the challenges faced by all these young professionals, right, it's actually heightened as a result of the pandemic because they are unable to get this human to human connection which they normally get when they get to travel to the office and actually work all day long at the office and have all these moments where they are able to learn from the seniors, right? Now they don't have opportunity because they don't even go to the workplace anymore, working from home. So they're isolated, and the only time that they get to actually even get check in from their seniors or their supervisors is when they actually have Zoom time. And Zoom time is not always in your face, right? It's probably only like half an hour to an hour maximum for many young professionals. So do you also, have these sort of conversations with these young professionals on how they're dealing with the pandemic and how they function in the workplace and being able to actually learn from those people that they're now missing out on because as a result of working from home?
Absolutely. I agree with you. And I think we as people, as individuals, we thrive when we are around people. There is a different sort of an energy. Now, imagine when you and I are talking like this. Of course, there is the energy flow and we are in the moment. But imagine if you and I were sitting together in the same room, like right in front of each other, the energy would have been completely different. There are so many other things that you pick from the energy around you in the room. There's learning, there is a feeling of internal feeling of support, that okay, they are in the same boat as I am, maybe, or they're figuring it out, maybe I can too. So yes, and with the heightened with the situation after the pandemic, things have gotten worse. In fact, one is in touch with various college students and young working professionals, and it's hard. It's really hard for them to keep up. And by keep up, there is such an emotional pressure of one delivering and holding your professional ground, while on the other hand you also want to take away so many other experiences from the college, from the workplace. So that goes missing. So trying and figuring out those little things that go missing and how we can get them and put them together, and at least form a puzzle which looks like fairly decent in the frame.
Right. Okay. And of course, they are losing out more than just water cooler moments with their senior colleagues, right? So sometimes I also empathize with young professionals, especially those who are trying to make a dent and impact early on in their career. But of course, they have to grind just like the rest of us. We also have to grind our way, either up through the corporate ladder or on our entrepreneurial journey. So these are the struggles that will actually help them to learn better. And of course, I understand you have also a bite-sized podcast called the New India Youth Pod, right? That was, or that is a podcast that you did or produced in collaboration with MyGov India. So may I ask you, what's the difference in terms of producing a podcast for Voice of Achievers and also producing a podcast, New India Your Pod Microcast? So how's the difference in experience for you, and which one do you prefer actually?
Both are relatively, although both deal with the youth. One is extremely deep. So when the Voice of Achievers podcast happens, it's extremely deep. It's a 40 to 50-minute conversation, and I got deep into the journey of the individual. It could be an entrepreneur, a professional, an artist. It could be a sports person. Whereas with the New India Youth Pod, the idea is to pick. This began during the pandemic, so the idea is to pick the challenges and the little things that young people go through, and sort of this is because this is bite-sized content and quick content that one can consume. It's more what should I say? You can just snack on it. It's snackable content, so you can just snack on it and yet be informed. So you just listen to it and you're done. You feel like, okay, so there were a couple of podcasts that we did. We've done a recent one on with somebody who ran. He's a runner. So what does it take for him to keep up with his running schedules, and what can we take from his experiences? So those are very quick ones, whereas the Voice of Achievers ones are extremely deep, where we go into each aspect of one's career, professional life, sometimes even personal life, depending on how comfortable they are.
So even though they are bite-sized and very snackable, right? It doesn't mean that they are easier to produce and easier to make, because we all know, like, for example, a TikTok video, a really good TikTok video.
It's harder.
Even more, requires even more effort and time to make it right? So less doesn't mean actually means more effort. So do you actually prefer to make microcasts or the deep, longer version podcast that we're all so used to?
Funnily, both are an extremely enriching experience for me, because with the MyGov ones, I also there is also a lot of Hindi involved, or the vernacular language involved, because you want to reach a wider audience. Even with the Voice of Achievers now, I started making it more Hinglish. We call that Hinglish, just to make it more accessible to various other cities and communities and people from various backgrounds. So yes, when you're saying shorter content is harder to produce, yes, it is, because you need to get out the information and you need it crystal clear, but you need it crisp as well. So that's where the editing skills come into play.
Who listens to these shows? What kind of download numbers are you getting, and how long have you been doing these podcasts?
This has been around for over 2 years, and with the MyGov podcast, the distribution lies with them. So I know about the downloads of the Voice of Achievers podcast, and I can tell you that it it is anything ranging between 3,000 and 5,000 downloads per month, and it increases by the month. So
That's fantastic. I think for anyone who just started podcasting, right, now, normally they are worried about download numbers. And of course, it's something that is actually not that important, especially if you just want to ensure that your podcast reach out to certain demographic, right? If your target audience, are only certain niche down, subsection of a community, right? It doesn't matter, that you get millions of downloads, per week. So I think what you're doing is for a very just cause, because you're reaching out to the youth. And of course, these youth are tuning in the thousands to your show. They get a lot of benefit from it. And of course, why is there a sense of joy in speaking to people on your podcast who derive their motivation from customer satisfaction that they witness every day? Can you maybe tell us and expand a bit on that?
So because I come from a human resource and HR and organizational behavior background, I thrive on people and people experiences. I love speaking to people, understanding these different challenges that they possibly face. So yes, because motivation is something that is hard for us to decode. Achievement motivation is just so difficult to decode. To each his own or her own, right? There are certain things that drive you, and there may be certain different things that drive me. So it's very interesting when collective experiences come together and they actually, so to say, shape you as a personality. So in the times that I have started podcasting, I have seen immense growth and development internally, because your perspectives broaden. The way you look at the world is different. It's just understanding different. I mean, imagine, come to think of it, Vine, in 2 days, that the number of guests that you're speaking to, I think when you sit back and relax after the 2 days, you will possibly be a different person altogether. So that's what it does to us, right? To ask you what is your motivation, I'm sure it will be connected with the people, or connected with how people come together, and multicultural experiences sort of shape you better, right?
100%. And before we let you go, I want to ask you one last question. Why your Voice of Achievers podcast is peppered with so many different flavors? I sense there's the old Calcutta's charm. There are also stories from literature, even Chomsky, by the way, culture, gender, and cinema. Is there any reason why it's geared towards all these different flavors?
So yes, well, Calcutta, because that's the space that I was born and brought up in. So there's accessibility. So that's ease of accessibility. But yet there are various other cultures, and there's also been a few international speakers from various countries. So why gender? Why culture? Why society? Why cinema? I think all of these put together are stuff that you will require, whether you're a professional, whether you're an entrepreneur, in the workplace, in life, in general. These are the things that you need to be sensitive about, you need to know about. These are the things that you need to have different perspectives about. So I always say this, that what someone is saying may not be what you agree with. There are so many times that I also disagree with the achievers coming in and the people that I interview. But it's not about agreement; it's about perspective. You get to listen to their perspective. You get to listen to their worldview, and that comes from their experiences. And because it's someone's personal experience, you put them together, and so many experiences together will ultimately clearly shape you as a personality, and you grow. So you're also on that path of self-actualization, right? So that's also there. But yes, these factors put together do make up the workplace, do make you a better professional, do make you a better student, do make you a better person. So hence the various socio-cultural aspects that or themes that I do end up touching upon.
I think we still have 2 minutes, so I'm going to squeeze in one last question, one final question, I promise.
Okay.
I understand that India is actually the top growing podcast markets in the world, not just Asia, yeah, in the world. It's the fastest growing. So in terms of like new adults who listen to podcasts in India every week, it's in the millions, yeah, and it's top rank number 1 in the world. So tell us about in India, what's the podcasting landscape like, and do you see any exciting development other than all this data, right? All these ranking results that are showing up everywhere on our socials. When you look around India, for example, in the city that you live, do you really see a lot of podcasters now joining the space to provide more supply of great podcast shows like your Voice of Achievers podcast? Do you also see many people that you know, including your family and friends and your peers, right, listening to more and more podcasts lately?
Yes, definitely I do. And given the screen time that now we are sort of akin to, it's just a welcome change, right? You put off the screen and you can still listen to the stories, and you can still get your information, you can still get your pop culture, you can still get entertainment, you can still get edutainment. So do I know many other people listening? Yes. In the country, more and more people are, from the time that I began, when I used to say that I'm podcasting, to now how people react to, oh, podcasting. Okay, so now they know what this is actually. So also the fact probably that we have known the radio as a medium of storytelling. So that also possibly helps people to jump onto podcasts. And this one being a more personalized experience, which you can access from anywhere. There's commute time, there's your gym time, there's your home chore time, anything and everything. In fact, we came up, we going to be launching like a podcasting competition for young creators, young students, young working professionals to come together and try and explore the medium for storytelling, because that's what we are heading to. We are heading to a voice first space.
This is fantastic and really exciting for us in the rest of Asia as well, because of course you guys are the trendsetters in terms of leading the charts now for the fastest growth in podcasting. So I actually, I'm looking forward to joining or to actually run an event in India in the near future. So I'm not sure what's the pandemic situation like over there, but I think it will be very soon, before I set foot in India and actually say hello to you and your community, all your youth listeners, right, that you're attracting to your Youth Pod and, of course, your Voice of Achievers podcast. So thank you very much for coming on, Yashika. Any last message for our audience before we say goodbye?
Keep listening, keep learning, and thanks, Vine, for bringing so many podcasters together. I think this initiative itself will possibly uplift the community and bring the idea of podcasting to the community, to Asia. It's so lovely that you're doing this.
Thank you so much, and thanks for your nice words and lovely, compliments. I'll take it. I always love compliments. So thanks again, Yashika. We hope to see you back again, maybe in our next month's festival, and you can tell us, what's going on with the youth in India and more updates from you. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks. Bye
bye. See ya. Hi, Evo. Ni hao.
Wei, ni hao. How are you?
It's your ni hao because that's like your trademark and.
Well, on this show, I mean, yeah, I don't say ni hao to everyone that I meet, but.
You're a dragon in the back, so you're celebrating Chinese New Year.
Chinese New Year, yes. My wife likes to decorate the space behind her half of the desk, and she did that for Chinese New Year. Exactly right.
Very nice. I think that's a very nice touch to an otherwise very bare, black-looking board.
it's boring. It does a great job of eliminating noises and reflections, but it's a tad boring, she said. So she likes to dress it up a bit.
Yeah, normally we have this, Chinese character called Fu, and then it's upside down. We call it Fu Tao because it's like upside down.
Oh.
So that's something like great fortune. I'm not sure whether she will also add that to your decoration in the weeks to come because Chinese New Year is really soon to be bestowed upon us. So I'm excited about Chinese New Year, but this year maybe not in the right frame of mind or the right mood as well. We can't even gather, for Chinese New Year dinners.
Oh, right. No, none of that. Unfortunately.
Exactly. Anyway, I really miss you because it's been a month since we last, caught up together in this festival format. Yeah. And of course, ever since I've been listening to your podcast pontifications, incredible value bombs that you're dropping every night because whenever you're streaming live, right?
Yeah.
I'm working out at the gym, 10 p.m. I'm always a late gymmer and it's like the moment when your voice comes up on my iPhone, right? I just stop whatever I'm doing. So normally I'm slacking and resting when I'm listening to you.
Well, I don't want to interrupt your workout, but that is nice. And luckily, it's only around 5 to 10 minutes. I'm interrupting your workout. Then you can get right back to it. That's good.
Exactly. I like that it's so snackable, and of course the value that you provide in every episode. So today we're gonna maybe just remake some of those previous broadcasts that were probably missed by some people in this part of the world in Asia. So I think those. Great content deserve to be remixed maybe for this festival and maybe starting out your most recent contribution. I think you had this great headline: video didn't kill the radio star, but will it change the podcaster? So can you drop some value bombs on us right now?
Well, I'm not sure about the bomb dropping, but I can talk a little bit about that. But it seems like once a year, I hear at least one person saying, "Man, video is it. Video is going to take over podcasting, and we'll finally be in that world where everybody is watching video. They're not just listening to audio. So podcasters, it's time to start getting your video game on." And I just don't know that that's true. I mean, first off, it hasn't been true. I've heard that prediction for the last at least dozen years. And it hasn't been that way. And I'm not sure that it's ever going to be a situation where video replaces audio. Look, it's just harder to do video, for one thing. To make really compelling video. Now, live video is a different thing. Doing a live event like this, we pull our camera up back and forth, and clearly for immediate communications, live tends to work really well. You and I have both been on Zoom calls or whatever where we have 12 to 15 people on them, and that just gets really cumbersome really quickly. And the tools to navigate people back and forth is a pain in the butt. But for two people having a conversation about something that other people want to watch and listen to, I think video is a fine choice. But at the same time, it's great live, but it's not great when it's not live. And for most podcasters, we all know that most people who listen to my show listen hours, if not days, and sometimes weeks after I've released the content. That's the nature of the on-demand media. And you can say, well, yeah, I can do the same with video. People do that with video, but you're much more picky. People tend to be much more picky about the videos they watch that are not live. They want things that are much, much higher produced, multiple camera angles that really tell a compelling visual story. And so that just automatically makes a difference between podcasters and videos right there. And so embrace video, podcasters, but it's probably not the future of podcasting, at least not anytime real soon.
And talking about the future of podcasting, you had a really interesting take on Clubhouse just a couple of weeks back. I think everyone's jumping in and seeing more action in Clubhouse these days. So you also mentioned about whether it's part of the future of podcasting or Clubhouse is actually the future, right? Can you weigh that for us once again?
Yeah. So Clubhouse, if you haven't yet experienced it, it's the only audio-only social network that we have. It's done through your phone. I used to liken it to a old party line back in the days when everybody had the same phone, but different rings would go, and you would know when it was your house. My grandmother had one of those. I remember a very, very, very small child. But really, what Clubhouse has become is more like Twitch for audio. So it's that live component that I was just talking about, but done in a way that's through your mobile device that allows other people to listen in on the conversation. But here's the important part: join in on the conversation with some really innovative moderation tools, at least for the conversation itself, to bring speakers up on stage and get them back down and have some sort of control over the room. So I've been in rooms that have 400 or 500 people in them, and still the conversation is valuable up on stage because it's not 500 people shouting at one another, which is a really, really cool thing. But it is mobile only, and it's great. So as podcasters, we should be in love with the idea of Clubhouse and social audio. Again, it's an audio-only medium. There is no visual component. Plus, it's live. Plus, we can bring guests on. So I think that Clubhouse is going to be some sort of a threat to things like live video conversations. For people who do produce their shows live, I think there might be an opportunity to stream the show as you're producing it over to Clubhouse and get some interaction with the guest. I think that's possible, but I don't think that's the biggest impact for it. I think as a community collaboration tool, Clubhouse is great. Like a little bit later today, I mean, it's only 6:30 in the morning, my time, but later on today in about 3 to 4 hours, I'm having people get together on Clubhouse at 11 a.m. my time, people who listen to the show, so we can talk further about some of the concepts I brought up on Clubhouse, on Podcast Pontifications, so I can get the listener feedback. It's not just me talking out loud. It's the guests. It's the people who want to hear, who have heard it. They can now come together and share their own thoughts and ideas. So as a community building tool, Clubhouse is great, and I think podcasters need to recognize that this is the first social media that might actually be really good for us and the way we communicate.
That's brilliant. And could you clue us in on how should podcasters actually integrate Clubhouse into our overall approach?
Yeah, it's going to be a bit of a challenge, because Clubhouse today, and by the way, we're using Clubhouse as a placeholder. Clubhouse is one of the first, if not the first, social audio app, but there are others coming. Twitter Spaces is out there. Twitter is trying to do its own version of Clubhouse in a very Twitter way. And there are other, I saw 2 or 3 others last week that opened up as well. So this is a growing trend. So how to integrate is going to be dependent on what each of those tools will allow. The first thing you have to get rid of the idea is that this is not a distribution channel. Because I push my show to Apple Podcasts and Spotify and Audible and every other platform that's out there. You could do that with Clubhouse if you really wanted to, but that's not what you should be doing. It's not a distribution channel. It's a new property. So you will be making additional content, live content, having live conversations. So as far as how to integrate it, I would say get your feet wet. Start setting up rooms, having conversations, and invite your listeners. Hopefully you've already made direct contact with some of the listeners of your show. You've got an email list or something. Send a note to all of them and say, hey, I'm starting some things on Clubhouse. Set up a time and a date and say, please join me there. Have your listeners come in, because that collaborative connection between the podcaster and their listeners will create something that's truly valuable, I think.
And it's getting more and more common to actually scroll through our LinkedIn feed and seeing everybody posting their rooms, right? Announcing a topic that we're covering and who are the invited guests as well. And I love actually seeing people doing that, because when I click on it, I could see exactly who will be showing up. And if the co-host or the guest looks like a stellar cast, and that's definitely something I want to bookmark and actually, be notified immediately when they're live. So that's also a great way to make it convenient, not to actually miss out on all this great action, yeah?
Yeah, that's right. Sharing when you're having these across as many channels as you can is a really good idea. You're right.
I love to hear your thoughts and opinions, about several other things. I think one of the other things that you covered recently as well, which sometimes I also struggle, is regarding controversial topics, whether, to actually be tempted to bring them up on a podcast or even like on my pet festival, for example, So these are the things that maybe you have actually simplified and break it down for us really well. So can you maybe just mix that for us for our Asian-based podcasters and community audiences?
Absolutely. It's tempting. every time something is brewing in the news, for anyone with a platform, anyone with a microphone, anyone with a camera, to jump on and say, hey, let me give you my take. I have an opinion about this. I want to share it with the world. That's a natural thing, and those of us who have microphones and platforms are more likely to want to do that. But also, we need to make sure that that's something we really want to dive into, because, look, not everybody in our listener base, not all of our listeners have the same opinions. There is a difference of opinions that are out there. There may be some really breaking, controversial news that doesn't actually fit the genre of your show. It could be some, international politics is the big blow up right now. But you make a podcast that's all about knitting sweaters. So, is it really the time? Now, people who make that show say, well, wait a minute, I'm politically active. I have an opinion. Why shouldn't I use my voice to tell people what I think about that particular topic? And to them, I say you totally should do that if that's really what you think you want to do. But in that episode, I try to counsel people about three things, basically. One, make sure you want to weigh into the topic. You don't have to, right? If other people are covering the news. If you don't say something about it to bring your opinion there, you're not really hurting anybody, because chances are, if it's a big controversial subject, other people know about it. So make sure that you want to do it, number one. The second thing is, make sure that your audience wants you to do that. Again, many of them may have a different opinion, or also, many of them might use your show as an escape from all of the news and the hot button topics. They may just want to tune in to your podcast for the next 30 minutes or 10 minutes or an hour and a half or whatever, and use that as a safe harbor against the other stuff that's out there. Look, I came for a podcast about knitting sweaters. That's what I want, right? So your audience has that drive. They have that understanding. So you got to really think about, what is that what the audience wants to do? And the third thing is, what happens if that's the first thing a brand new listener hears? They went to your show thinking, well, I've heard people say this is a great show about knitting sweaters, and the first thing they listen to is you going off about the plight of something somewhere, or some international person did something inappropriate. You're not really living up to the expectations set for your show. And so people are going, that new listener may be turned off immediately. And instead of doing what we want a person to do, is subscribe and then listen and then tell 5 or 6 other people, they will not subscribe, and you're not going to get those 5 or 6 other people. So before you jump into controversy, decide if you want to do it or not. And if you're going to do it, fine, just kind of warn people. Warn people that you're going off tangent. This is not what you normally talk about. So that lets them turn off. That lets the new person recognize, oh, they don't normally go crazy on this stuff. Maybe I'll skip this episode and go to the next one in the chain and see what it's like. Just be wise. Just do it with eyes wide open is really all I'm saying.
I think this is also something that musicians are struggling, especially those musicians who are maybe pro certain politician or certain party, right? And I remember, that was sometime during the election, and Johnny Lydon, singer of Sex Pistols, was actually using a reunion with his Sex Pistols members. And of course, instead of talking about music, talking about Nevermind the Bollocks album, or talking about some of the brilliant tunes on the album, right? He's using that as a platform to actually praise Trump, for example. Yeah. So it's kind of like alienating some of the fans would otherwise, really appreciate his punk rock roots, of course, pioneering a movement, the punk movement, but to actually find out that he supports Trump, for example, turns off and alienates so many new listeners.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. And to me, I see the two situations there as pretty different, right? I mean, I can watch a movie with an actor that I like. I can listen to music from an album, from a group or a singer that I write. And if I later discover that person turns out to be a horrible person, or someone who I wouldn't want to have a beer with, I get to make a decision whether I want to listen to the music anymore or watch the movies. But that's a personal decision for me. And in reality, I should be able to ignore the fact that this person is a crazy person and just enjoy the entertainment. their public life and their news life got into my eyeballs, and it's like, okay, that's unfortunate. Now I know something about somebody, and I suppose that's the same thing with podcasters, right? I mean, I'm pretty active in some of the social media platforms, and while I talk a lot about podcasting, I don't only talk about podcasting. I share some pretty controversial opinions about myself. I'm not Trumpy. I'm on the other crazy end of the spectrum, but I'll wade into topics about religion. I'll wade into topics on a variety of fronts that I know there are people out there who have radically different ideas than I am. And that's fine. I don't mind that, because, hey, if you're following me on Twitter and you get to see the real me and you don't appreciate it, you can always unfollow me, and you can still listen to the great advice I give on Podcast Pontifications if you want. It's your choice to make. So I'm not afraid of being controversial in my public life. I try to keep much of the controversy out of my podcast so people can just enjoy the content that I create.
And talking about joy, of course, you have another wonderful episode of Podcast Pontification where you talk about the joy of successfully creative podcasting, right? And often with podcasting comes an assumed expectation of success, especially some who are chasing download numbers or monetization. But for many podcasters, especially I think in this part of the world as well, podcasting is just a purely creative expression. So one that is worthy of being better at, but for reasons other than commercial success. So can you maybe jam about this topic and expand it for us?
Absolutely. So you're right, Wayne, that there's a lot tied up in podcasting, because why would you want to do this thing? Well, clearly the only reason to do this thing is so that you can get money out of the other end of it. And I've always thought that was a strange proposition, because it's not true in everything else that we do. A couple of people want to go play basketball on the weekend at the park. They're spending money on good shoes. They're spending money on a basketball, but they're just down there having fun for the sake of having fun. None of them, they might have dreams of someday being in the NBA, or playing professional basketball if they're, 10-year-old kids. You have that dream, but look, the reality is it's not going to happen, right? A fraction of a percent of people actually make it to that particular level. And I think we forget about that in podcasting, but more than just forgetting about it, when we try to better our podcast, when we take a course that says, how to podcast, or maybe just how to from the beginning, right? Just getting started, podcasting 101, all of those courses have a monetization angle to them. If you take another course to help you get better at something, the reason you want to get better at that is so that you can somehow make money off of it. But for the vast majority of podcasters out there, they don't even want to make money. This is just purely a creative expression. When I got into podcasting all the way back in 2004, there were no designs on making any money. It was just something to do for fun. It was a way for me to make art, if you will, and share that art with the world. And as people, as humans, we're creative by nature. We want to make cool things. We want to share those cool things with other people who think that they're cool. If maybe there's a tiny chance of making money on the other side of that, that's fine. But that doesn't normally enter into our consideration when we're deciding how to make the content, because we are creative people. But I think in podcasting, almost since the beginning, we've always had that pressure of make the money, when for the vast majority, I'm talking 99.999% of podcasters will never make a penny on podcasting, yet they still do it. Why do they do it? Because they love it, and there are people out there who also love what they create. So let's not forget, as podcasters, that sometimes it is okay, and not just sometimes, most of the time, it is okay just to be great at something, to make something that people really appreciate, and that's enough of a reward.
And it's just like for some people, right? For them, the biggest wealth is waking up feeling healthy. To them, that's all they need. And for the other, segment of people, they are just interested in health as in lots and lots of money. So it's like two different school of thought, two different species of people with different perspective. But of course, it's not all about just doing it for the sake of monetization. And of course, podcasters don't just do this. Sometimes they're creating because they just want to live. This is one way for them to feel that they are alive. And if anyone actually points out, you're not making money from that, you should stop. That's like killing them.
Exactly right. Ask any author in your life why they write, and most of their answers will be, because I can't not write. I have to do this. I have to keep, my brain won't stop. I have these ideas. I need to put them down. And, it's really easy now to push a button and have it published on Amazon or any other property out there. So, of course, that's why I'm publishing. But, people were writing and putting things in their dresser drawers or leaving a stack on a notebook for years before they had the chance to publish them. People paint just for fun. They go out and they spend a lot of money in the art store, buying oils or watercolors and canvases and the right kind of brush, whatever, without ever wanting to make any money. They just hang it on the wall in their house. We should embrace that in podcasting as well.
And in terms of people who have actually made money or was a huge success, not just podcasters, but maybe even the musicians, right? Even while they have remained maybe successful earlier in their career, but later on in their career, they are less relevant. Maybe I'm like name dropping a few artists here. People like Eminem, for example. His last great record, I think it was 2000 when he was doing that Slim Shady thing, right? So that was his moment when he was really selling tons of albums and really relevant in pop culture. And these days, he's no longer relevant because there's a new crop of new artists and rappers who are even more, maybe innovative to some. However, Eminem is still putting out like an album a year, even though he's considered by many to be irrelevant. So that actually segues into my next, topic that I want you to riff and jam about, which is the battle against irrelevancy in podcasting.
Yeah, it's something that if you listen to that episode, Wayne, then you know that it's something that I feel personally. This affects me every single day. I've been at this since 2004, which is either the beginning of podcasting or not long after the beginning of podcasting, however you count it. And yeah, I struggle with. It's not really, well, it's really more a fear. I fear that I'm going to wake up someday and the world of podcasting will have shifted so drastically, then my 16 years, or maybe it happens in 5 years, so my 21 years, it doesn't matter anymore. All of those lessons that I did are completely, all those lessons I learned, all the advice that I give is no longer valid. So that I'm really concerned with. I think it's a different thing for tastes in music, because tastes change. It's like taste in podcasting change, and what becomes popular is going to go up and it's going to go down. But so I struggle with this sense of irrelevancy, and I think others do as well. We don't talk about it a lot. So what I try to do with that is I try to fight it. The best way I can not become irrelevant is to stay engaged, not just do my own thing in my corner and not talk to anybody else, but I'm actively working with other people who are better at this than I am. I actively cultivate relationships with the generation of podcasters one below me who have a whole different set of skills and expertise, and also keep my eyes on the future. Where are things going? Making sure that I'm not just stuck in the way we're doing things today in 2021. I always want to know what's happening, going forward. Bringing up musicians is interesting. I've been listening to music for a long time because I'm an old man. But a lot of the artists that I would listen to, like in the 80s and the 90s, are no longer putting out albums, but they're still deeply involved in the music industry. Many of them have become producers. They own their own studios, or they do some sort of a talent management. They just transition. And I think that's an opportunity as well. How does one transition from being behind the microphone, talking into it, to now supporting it? If in fact, maybe I should say, when in fact the ecosystem continues to change and we have all these new things happening and new organizations, how could I play a less in public role and much more of a behind the scenes and supportive roles for the new version going forward. Because how many more years can I keep it going? Do I want it? Am I taking the Larry King approach? We just lost recently, the great broadcaster Larry King is broadcasting till my 89th birthday or whatever it is. Or do I fade more into the background and just become very supportive and ensure other people are going to be quite successful at whatever their goals in podcasting are? I'm okay with that as an answer as well. The important thing is to not be static. Be ready to change and plug yourself into as many of those change points as possible so you know what's going on.
And of course, every podcaster, even the likes of Joe Rogan, will also be considered irrelevant. It's just a matter of time. And of course, that means that there are always opportunities for other new breed or new wave of podcasters to actually innovate in that space, or maybe turn it into something that is still about regarding the field or the realm of podcasting or broadcasting or doing talk shows and things like that, but maybe called in other terms as well. So it doesn't mean that Joe Rogan will just disappear completely. He will probably be a very good coach. Maybe he will be someone who is like you, who is always, influencing us on a daily basis with your podcast pontification and philosophizing about the things that is close to our heart, and allowing us actually put in words that we can't express, as podcasters, but you put it so succinctly for us. I think that's a really wonderful thing, and I actually want to point out to everyone who's watching this or replaying this, on a podcast replay, to really go check out your podcast pontification and to follow you on Twitter if they haven't, and of course to check out your Buy Me a Coffee link as well. I think that's one of the ways that we can show our appreciation for you, and to also just say thank you, because you've been basically the voice that accompanies me when I'm in the gym and give me some time to rest.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you, and I appreciate the connection with you and other people. Podcasting is not monolithic. It is not one thing. It's a different thing wherever you happen to live in the world. Like you'll remember, I lived in Thailand for a few years, and the podcasting scene in Thailand is vastly different than the podcasting scene in China, which is vastly different than the podcasting scene in America. And you could just rinse and repeat that for all of the countries. What's happening in South and Central America with the Spanish language and the Portuguese language podcasting is great, but it's vastly different than what we have here. So back to my thanks to you. I appreciate connecting with you so I can understand better what's happening in your side of the world and what's happening with your generation of podcasters that are coming up with brand new ideas we didn't consider. That's what's successful. I mean, we are all connected by the same internet today. Almost all of us are connected by the same internet today. Let's not talk about the Great Firewall of China. But we're all connected to the same internet so we can share the ideas. We don't have to stay in our neat little country-defined boxes or even our genre-defined boxes. We have to branch out and understand what's happening with all these other places. It just makes us smarter. I think it makes us better connected, and it makes us ready to change and adapt to whatever the future may bring, because, look, all we have to look forward to is change in the future. So podcasters, prepare yourself for that.
Fantastic. Always a great pleasure, and I always learn tons by just talking to you. So I really I'm anticipating, your next appearance on our festival again. We're doing this monthly, so I hope that you'll come back next month as well.
I will, Wayne. Thanks very much for having me on, my friend.
Thank you, my friend.
Cheers.
Take care of yourself over there. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yes. And that's Evo Terra. Make sure you check out Podcast Pontifications. I think it's listen to daily podcast. I think he actually put episodes between Monday to Thursday. So of course you can also see and catch him in action in Clubhouse. I've already followed him on Clubhouse so that whenever he's live, right, I'll be able to tune in and also try to absorb as much as I can, because there's actually tons of experience to share with podcasters out there, and especially those who are doing podcasting. If you're new, you're a beginner, you want a sense of direction, you want clarity, right? That is basically the show that you must listen to. And of course, I'm so happy that he's back and we'll be back next month again. So looking forward to that. I think we're close to 10 p.m. right here in Singapore. Looking at my list, I think Garry Hayes is my next guest. He hails from UK and is a very interesting music fan too, because he has a podcast production company agency called Highway 61. So that immediately rings a bell, right? Because if you're a fan of Bob Dylan, if you like that record, Highway 61 Revisited, you're definitely gonna not want to miss this, because he'll be talking about why he named his agency Highway 61, and maybe we'll also muse about some other topics like football or music, of course, and what's close to our hearts, podcasting. So I'm just waiting patiently for him to appear backstage, and hopefully he can get on soon. Checking my email as well to see whether he's facing any issue coming on. Let me see. Okay. Well, no email from him. That means everything should be a-okay. We're just waiting for him to appear. So meanwhile, instead of just me continuously, talking about Garry Hayes, right, before he's here, maybe I'll just put some spotlight on our sponsors, sponsor members of PodFest Asia. So this is a confession time, because in the beginning when I started PodFest Asia, I didn't have any intention to actually, even ask for any financial or individual contribution, or even like company sponsors, or maybe it's in the back of my mind, but I didn't really know how to craft the ask, right? So it was until I was streaming live, and of course during the entire inaugural event, there wasn't any, for example, please support us and make sure you donate or things like that. It was until when I was streaming, and then I was receiving a lot of messages about, oh, this is a great idea. PodFest Asia is something that brings community podcasters together in Asia and beyond. You're also sharing great resources and bringing on killer guests, people like Evo Terra. And they're all like bringing, their A game to the festival. And hopefully you continue doing more editions of PodFest Asia. So I'm getting that sort of responses through DMs and, of course, through emails as well. And out of those emails, there are a few that actually ask how they can actually, become a sponsor member or to contribute to what we're doing, so that, we can continue to do what we love, which is basically to highlight others, to put a spotlight on others, especially podcasters and those in this space. And at the same time, cover some of our expenses while we spend our time doing this PodFest Asia. So what happened was that I decided to actually set up a Patreon page. I think that's something that many podcasters, if you're wondering how to actually, have a frictionless way of collecting even things like payment or donations or contributions, that's just one out of many, many ways where you can actually open your doors and allow anyone, with the means to do so, to actually make a contribution. So that's what I did. And through this Patreon page, I was able to bring in some sponsor members. And one of them, is, as you can see from this banner right here, it's Sounds Profitable. So Brian Baletta is basically the first sponsor member that came on board. So shout out to Brian Baletta, because he's doing something really great, which is through his newsletter, where he educates us about EdTech and many other relevant topics. So if you haven't subscribed, make sure you go subscribe to his newsletter. It's amazing because it's a must-read newsletter for everybody. So without further ado, let's bring on Garry Hayes into the studio. How are you, my friend?
Hi, Wayne. How are you? Sorry I'm late.
No problem, because hiccups happen, right? This morning I was supposed to be doing a morning breakfast session as well. And guess what? I was sleeping and I had to reschedule my guests. And I didn't show, it's how unprofessional, right? It was.
I wasn't sleeping. I was working, but yeah, sorry, I didn't realize the time and I got caught up.
Much better reason, much better excuse, more valid reason, more power to you. And I was so guilty of that, and I think I was just purely exhausted after streaming live for 2 days. This is my third night of streaming this festival, so into day 2 as well. So this morning I just felt it. I really felt it. Like I need to take a quick nap, and the quick nap became like 3 hours.
So how's it been?
It has been great, because I'm reinvigorated and energized by the awesome speakers who came on to this festival. People like you, and I just want to maybe formally introduce you to our audience in Asia. Garry Hayes, of course. who is someone who actually founded Highway 61. Am I right?
That is correct.
Highway
Highway
61?
61.
Without the word revisited, right?
Say it again.
Without the word revisited.
Yes, without the word revisited. Maybe if we go bankrupt and we come back, we can call it that.
So Garry Hayes, co-founder and director of podcasts at HWY61 or Highway 61, is a narrative podcast production company and also a recovering football writer after 15 years working for
tell me
leading
about
clubs
it.
and federations, including Chelsea Football Club, UEFA, NFL, and your work can also be found online for BR UK, 442, CNN. I read all this stuff, and I might have read all your work, many times over the years, but I've never had the opportunity to meet you until today.
Oh, thanks. I think you're the one person reading, right?
We have to start maybe somewhere and maybe talk about Chelsea. Your take on Frank Lampard's departure.
Oh, where do we start? It's obviously a disappointment because I think that there was a lot of goodwill to Lampard from the Chelsea fan base. Obviously, it hasn't worked out exactly the way that everyone would have wanted. So it's obviously disappointing to see him leave. I think that there was obviously from the fan base, especially, there was that emotional connection to a manager that I haven't seen at Chelsea since Jose Mourinho the first time he was there. And again, you go back to Ruud Gullit and Gianluca Vialli as well. They sort of had a similar, affection from the fan base when they were there in the mid to late 90s. But obviously nothing tops Frank Lampard that, in my view, speaking as a fan rather than professionally as a journalist, he's the greatest player at Chelsea that I've ever seen. I'm not saying he's the greatest player because people that had the privilege of seeing Peter Osgood and Charlie Cook and Bobby Tamblyn or even Roy Bentley would suggest otherwise, maybe. But for me, he's the best player I've ever personally seen at Chelsea. He's an idol to Chelsea fans. So to see him leave is obviously disappointing. But then that's football, isn't it? I know that's a bit of a cliche, but I thought that Chelsea were going to maybe do things a bit different this time. When Lampard came, the club was in a bit of a position of peril, shall we say? With obviously the transfer ban and not quite knowing what the direction was. And I think that people make a lot about statistics, maybe about points average per game and whatnot, but I don't think that's relevant. I think for some people it might be, but I think that when you look at what Lampard was tasked with, I don't think that was. I think you look at his record of bringing young players through. He created a clear, defined pathway for players to move from the academy into the first team. At Chelsea, they call it crossing the road because at the Cobham training ground, you've got, as you go in, on the right-hand side is the first team training centre, and then on the left is the academy, and obviously there's a road that goes in between it. It's a small, country lane, I guess, and obviously players have to cross there to get into that first team building. But I think that he created a pathway for that, and obviously Chelsea languishing in 10th, I think they were when he got fired, obviously isn't a good look. But I think that beyond what we're seeing on the pitch, there's a lot more that goes on at a football club in terms of what managers can achieve. So it's a shame to see him go. I think I'd like to see him. I wrote a piece for it to quote my own work here for 442 at the start of the season, and they were, it was predicting this season, and my view was that Chelsea have got no right to be in a title race this year. Just because they're Chelsea doesn't give them a God-given right to be in a title race with City and Liverpool, who quite frankly are better teams. Whether you like it or not, whether you're a Chelsea fan, I think you got to acknowledge that. But I think where Chelsea what they were trying to do is peak at a time when Liverpool and City were maybe coming down. And for whatever reason, the club thinks they can't peak at that time with Lampard in charge, and that they've appointed, Thomas Tuchel now, which is probably annoying for Chelsea fans that he's come in and he's been so charming, because I think maybe people hand on heart will think that, it's not Thomas Tuchel's fault at all that obviously Lampard's not there. And I think maybe people would want him to come in and maybe be the devil almost. And he's come in, he's done it with a smile, and he's done it the right way. And he's, shown a lot of respect to Frank Lampard. So it's just a shame really that it's ended the way it is. But then, that's, to quote that cliche again, that's football, and it's what happens. It's part and parcel of being a manager.
I love it when you talk about Chelsea. I love it when you empathize with Frank Lampard because obviously he's a hero to you. I think I will feel the same if Steven Gerrard manages Liverpool one day, my beloved club, and decided, or maybe, FSG, right? The owners of the club decided to let him go after less than, 2 seasons. I think the fans will also be very unhappy about it. But I think I could feel when you're talking about Chelsea, right, that you really love sports. And of course, your career was in the sports circle for many years. And tell us why you're excited about Highway 61's first partnership of 2021 with Elite Sports Travel, who came on board with the Neil Reynolds podcast for the NFL playoffs and Super Bowl. And having so many great names, right, from the NFL appear on your podcast, including reigning MVP Lamar Jackson and Johnny Hacker.
Yeah, so it's obviously great to be able to bring partners on board with our content. We try to work with partners that buy into the same things that we're trying to do. Obviously, you're never going to be in a world where you can pick and choose who you're working with, but the way we do the Neil Reynolds podcast is it's a little bit different, maybe because I've worked with Neil for a number of years, and for anybody who is watching now, Neil is like the preeminent voice on the NFL in the UK, and I guess I'd say Europe. He's a very well respected voice on the NFL. He works for or works with the NFL in the UK, does a lot of events and a lot of work across their communications in the UK. And of course, he's known as being the anchor and the face of the Sky Sports coverage. So Neil's a very well respected name. And what we've done with Neil is I've worked with him for a long time, and we did a podcast together in October 2019, which was called Overtime, which was all about NFL culture in the UK, and sort of it was just a mini series just trying to show what happens away from the pitch, right? So we did a lot. We worked with a film critic called James King, who did like film reviews talking about, taking fans into another side of what the NFL is. Because for me, until I started working with Neil properly, I'd never watched a minute of American football. I didn't know anything about it. My route into NFL was movies, Any Given Sunday, and other movies like that, where what I find of it is this is such a stop-start sport that you can shoot it really beautifully. And when you get directors like Oliver Stone working on movies like that, who have made incredible movies like Platoon and Born on the 4th of July and others, when you put them into that sports world and they start shooting it with the same perspectives that they've done these amazing movies with, you get what you get with Any Given Sunday. It's a credible movie about drama and sport. So that was my route into it. So we brought that into Overtime and tried to look at the culture of American football. And then from there, we developed what has become the Neil Reynolds podcast together, where Neil telling these live stories of people in and around the sport. So we've spoken to, the quarterback of the Miami Dolphins at the start of the season, which was Ryan Fitzpatrick. We've spoken to Lamar Jackson. But they're players. We've spoken to executives like Scott Pioli, who was the general manager of the New England Patriots when they were just winning everything in NFL. So what we've done with that is Neil wanted to become a podcast personality as much as he is a TV personality in the UK. So we've just worked together to do that. And Neil has created his own sort of a mini company called the Reynolds Podcast Network. And through that, we've partnered with Neil and we've released 2 podcasts this year. One was called Game Picks, which was just a fun preview show, picking winners and losers every week in the NFL. But then, the real meat and bones of what we're doing is the Neil Reynolds podcast, where we're telling these stories that are really fascinating and, getting real good insight into what these players have had to do in order to achieve success. Because I think there's certain things that in Europe we might take for granted, and you hear to what some of these players go through when they're growing up in the deep south or elsewhere, where they come from, very underprivileged backgrounds, to put it politely, and they go on to become these huge stars in their sport. So it's been great doing that with Neil, and then obviously bringing Elite Sports Travel into it. They're just a brand that they came to us through Neil because Neil's done a lot of work with them, but they're just a good brand to work with, and we know that we can offer them value. And what they do, they do things right, and what they're trying to do with their business, bringing their passion for sports to a UK fan base and delivering, I guess I'm towing the party line here, but holiday packages, for want of a better term. And you just see what they're trying to achieve, and it sort of lines with what we're doing as well. So it's worked well, and we know from it's only a short little partnership with them for the playoffs and the Super Bowl, but we know from the early data that they've had a really good response and pick up to it. So it's good that everyone wins from that partnership, really.
This is brilliant. And of course, you have so many stable of podcasts that are awesome to hear, to listen. And they also look as good as they sound. So why do you focus so much, should I say, on the quality of your artwork, of your cover? Do you think that that actually entice people to actually click through and listen to an episode longer if it's actually supplemented by a really good, either logo of a podcast or cover or episode of a podcast show?
Yeah, I think we just want to stand out. We are just a tiny little company in the UK at the moment, and we're trying to make, some big noise about ourselves. And, we're a small team, but we're growing. And my co-founder, Matt, we've worked together for years, and he's incredible at what he does. And it's just utilizing that ability that he's got, that I will bring the storytelling and the production and contacts in order to get us where we want to be with the content we're producing. But then Matt does the other side of it, where I just feel like as we create, I try not to use the term brands, but I can't think of a better term for it, really, because it does sound so corporate, and we're anything but corporate. But just creating brands that people can respond to, brands that, they look cool, they look good on your phone, they look good, in app stores. And it's just sort of allowing us to create, a full package of what Highway 61 is, really, where, when we create the artwork, we go through many different layers of, Matt will create these sheets of, it's almost like he's a scrapbook of work as he develops ideas, and then we'll end up, narrowing it down to 6, and then we get to 3, and then we get to obviously the one that we choose. But we just try to put as much effort into that, because we want people to see it and it to really resonate, because we want it to go beyond being a podcast, whether it's creating something that looks good on a t-shirt or something that looks good on a mug, that just sort of allows people to have that affinity of what we're doing. Because people talk a lot about trying to create communities, and coming from a football background, where growing up, the thing that I identified most with was the Chelsea badge. And it's sort of trying to apply that to podcasts that, I'm not saying people are going to come at it and they're going to be getting our artwork tattooed on their arm or something crazy like that. But it's just sort of trying to give some, people that come to us, and also, people that want to work with us, to show that, look, we try to do things properly. We might not always get it right. There might be a few things that people see that they don't like, but we're trying to create that identity that someone sees it and it's got the thumbprint of Highway 61 on there. And we've done it with a lot of, I think we've done it well with everything that we've done so far. We try to be a little bit different. I think, especially in, podcasts now, as everyone is trying to get onto that, just to show that, it's not about just producing something that sounds really good. We want it to look good as well. And it's certainly something that we're trying to achieve, because we've got other things we're trying to achieve with the business beyond podcasts. And obviously our artwork is a big part of that. And we've got these grand ideas that when we've got our big studio ready and we're flying, that we've got all this beautiful artwork around the place, and it's all ours.
And I'm sure they actually live in the place with all these posters of your shows, which are hung on the wall, right? I think that's a great idea for decoration, and of course, a great identity as well for your new studio. So some of your upcoming shows as well, they look good. They also sound really good in terms of the show titles, like Born to Run After the Boss. That's obviously
another passion project, that one. That's that was recorded pre-COVID, and it hasn't come out yet because of me. I'm the one who's held it up, because it's a music series about Bruce Springsteen, and I've produced it with a friend of mine called Kerry Levy, who is working on a lot of other stuff with us, he's probably watching this. I don't want to be too nice to him, but he's very good at what he does, and he's made some incredible work in the past, and he did this amazing documentary called Bananas, which is about the band Gorillaz. And when I saw that, that's when I said to Kerry, I was like, look, I want to work with you, because I knew him already, but I wanted to work with Kerry because of that series that and it just really struck me. I was like, okay, he speaks the same language as me. And so we've done that together. And I went to the US and I recorded it for 6 weeks pre-COVID. But it hasn't come out yet because I just want it to sound right. And what I've done is my brother's collaborating with me because he's a musician. And because we're a small outfit, we haven't got the rights to go in and buy Born to Run and all this other music. So we're basically composing our own music for it, because I want it to sound like an album where when people hear it, I want them to hear this music like they're listening to an album for the first time. And so it's going to have, like, obviously it's about Bruce Springsteen. It's like this odyssey through Springsteen fandom, where it starts off in my hometown in the UK, and then we go to New Jersey and we go to Nashville and we speak to people who are Springsteen fans that perform covers there, and come back here and sort of just trying to get that culture of Springsteen. But I want the music to really resonate as well with people, where it have like these Springsteen inflections to it, and we just haven't got our sound right. So when that comes out, it will be hopefully a really good series, where when we started recording it, I wanted it to be something that changes what people think you can do with a music podcast. Now, I don't know if that will happen. People might hear it and think it's a whole load of rubbish, but it's being done with a lot of heart, and just really trying to achieve something that is something that I'm passionate about. But then, that's what we try to do with everything, really. And we try to be creative with our names as well.
Any chance of Bruce Springsteen making a guest appearance on this podcast?
Yeah, imagine that. If he did, it would be great, because it would mean that we've been successful with it, and it's the right sort of people have listened to it, I guess, because we're doing it in the right way as well, where we're it's heartfelt, it's being told from the right place, and there's no controversy to it. It's just sort of like, how does a singer from working class South New Jersey, who's 71 years old, how does he connect with a kid growing up on a council estate in the UK? That's basically what it is. And if Springsteen heard it and liked it and then wanted to come on as an interview, it'd be great. But we've done the series where it would work without Springsteen being part of it. But obviously, if the boss comes in and says he wants to meet me, then I certainly wouldn't turn that down. Look, this is how much of a fan I am. For Christmas, someone bought me all these old copies of Rolling Stone, and I've got them all here, sat waiting for me to read. Look, these weren't put here by design. I've got them here, just stacked up, waiting for me to read them. That's how much of a freak I am. I do apologize.
This is amazing. You're a true blue Bruce Springsteen fan, and of course, it's shown by that particular issue that you still kept after all these years, right? I also have my magazines lying around, but I think mostly alternative press, a few Rolling Stones as well. Those magazines brings back so much memory, and every time when you just walk past it, you just feel like picking it up and just escape, right, with that magazine. So especially your favorite artist on it.
Yeah, and I just love reading old articles. Like it's funny, I'm talking about Bruce Springsteen now. I'm an even bigger Bob Dylan fan, hence the name of our company as well. But I just love reading old articles, and I feel like I was born in the wrong era. I should have been born in the 50s so I could grow up in the 60s and experience all this, because I go back, and it's sort of like, especially when you can read old articles online, but when you read these old magazines, that at one point I was buying them all on eBay and I was getting them delivered, and I got stacks of all these old Melody Maker magazines and stuff with Bob Dylan interviews. And when you read it, you smell the dust, and you smell the age and I just love like reading these old interviews and just sort of getting this insight to a bygone era, really, where it's the same thing I do with Chelsea. When I grew up, I've got 6 brothers and 1 sister, and all my family are Chelsea, and we were just crazy Chelsea fans. And obviously there was no social media at the time, and football wasn't as readily available on TV as it is now. And we had this video called The Official History of Chelsea, but it went up to 1989. So I was like 7 or 8 years old when it came out, and we would just watch it over and over and over again, because I just wanted to learn everything about the history of Chelsea, and seeing these old black and white video clips of Chelsea players. And then I was brought up on the team of, Peter Osgood, Doherty's Diamonds era, when Chelsea were a really successful team. And that, just having that appreciation for the history, I think it's carried over into like passions elsewhere. And it all started with Chelsea, I guess.
VHS tapes, magazines.
VHS, exactly. VHS. I'll tell you a funny story though, because it took years for us to get the VHS, and my dad did it begrudgingly because he was a Betamax fan, and we had a Betamax, and then we only had like 4 films on it, and Betamax died obviously, so we couldn't get any more. So in the end, he begrudgingly got a VHS. So he had a VHS and a Betamax, and the Chelsea stuff was on the VHS.
Amazing, right? How about your cassette tapes? Do you have cassette tapes of Bob Dylan?
No, I have vinyl. I've got all. I'm looking at my vinyl right now. I just pointed to them, which you can't see, which is pointless me doing. But yeah, I've got them where, and this is how much of an idiot I am, that my vinyl, the only vinyl I'm allowed in my collection as my personal rule is Bruce Springsteen and Bob Dylan. I have no other vinyl apart from those, just because I like listening to them, hearing them crack. Whereas everything else, I'm like, I'm fine listening to any other music elsewhere, but if I want to listen to vinyl, I'll listen to Springsteen and Dylan, because I like, especially Dylan, because I like hearing it sound really raw. I don't like it when it's been polished, and I like hearing his breath on the microphone, because that's how it was recorded and that's how it was meant to be sound. You know, that's how it was meant to sound. And it's almost like you can be in a Greenwich Village cafe listening to, Dylan playing some tunes, and you can hear him plucking each guitar string. And that's the vinyl for you, right? That's what the vinyl brings. I love it.
Since we're on the topic of Bob Dylan, why Highway 61 Riff is the 6th studio album by Bob Dylan? I think it was released in August 30th, 1965 by Columbia Records, right? Yeah. Why did it inspire the name of your podcast production company?
Well, we were going to go over a couple of other names, but then they already existed. But Highway 61 is, contrary to belief elsewhere, it's the greatest record ever recorded. You've heard it here first. But it was just, starting your own company, you want it to feel personal. And but I wanted it to be neutral as well. And I just love that album. That album is, without getting too deep, it's an album I turn to all the time to listen to. I listen to it probably like 3 or 4 times a week, even now. And I just absolutely love it. I just think there's not a bad song on there. And it's something that just reminds me of, how I got into music. It's a very personal album for reasons that I won't bore you with. And it just felt right. And you could also argue as well that Highway 61 is like a route out of something, where Highway 61 as the road is the road that runs out of Duluth, Minnesota, where Bob Dylan's from, and it runs right down to New Orleans. And it was, his way out of his town, I guess you could put it like that. And it's sort of like my way into another area of a career, I guess, and a different area in life, which I know sounds probably more, I'm trying to make it sound more profound than it actually is, but yeah, it works on a few different layers, I guess.
Because I prepared for this particular podcast with you, right? And I actually went to research on this record because this has, for some weird reason, this is an album that has always avoided me. So in fact,
are you a Bob Dylan fan then?
I wasn't ever, maybe just blowing in the wind kind of fan, okay, but never as in someone who actually listened through an entire album by him. And I finally did. And guess what? Ever since I prepped for this particular episode for you, right? 3 days ago, I've been playing this album, I think more than 24 times.
I love it, man. You got to keep doing it. Keep doing it. I love it. What's your...
inspired me to actually listen to it, because when I hear that coming out of my speakers, I was like, where have you been all my life? This album is incredible, especially the first two opening tracks. They're rocking.
It's such a good album. I just love it. And my favorite Dylan song of all time is on there as well, which is Desolation Row. But there's just so many tracks on that, like even, and you say about, we name our podcasts, we try to be creative with the names. Some of the names of the songs on there are just like out of this world. Like It Takes a Lot to Laugh, It Takes a Train to Cry. And you hear the barroom piano at the start of the song and that. It's just this really incredible album. But also as well, it's got the opening track on it is like a Rolling Stone. And you hear that organ come in at the very beginning. That is just generation defining. It's a generational song because Dylan was a generational talent, you know, and you hear that whole album, what it means culturally as well. I'm so glad you love it, man. This conversation just got even better than it was. I love it. I love the fact you're into that album. What was your favorite song on it?
The first 2 tracks for some reason, but of course the rest of the album are as stellar as the first 2. It's just that the first 2 tracks sound so fresh, and I couldn't believe that it was recorded in 1965.
Yeah,
so
that was an incredible period of Dylan as well, because in that year he released Bringing It All Back Home and Highway 61 Revisited, and you go and listen to Bringing It All Back Home, and you're just thinking, like, how is this guy releasing 2 albums that are this good in the same year? And then he follows them up the year later with Blonde on Blonde, and he was doing stuff I cannot, you know, even Springsteen, with the creativity of Springsteen, you know, his albums are amazing, but you see they come out where they're 2 years apart, and you know he'll do a lot of work in the studio, whereas Dylan was just so consistent with what he was doing. He was so prolific, and he was just putting out song after song after song. And then when you listen to This Is Gonna Take You Real Deep, if you get into Dylan properly and you start listening to the bootleg series, I start panicking, thinking I haven't listened to all of the music, and because the bootleg series is all the stuff that was like left on the cutting room floor, or it's live recordings of songs that didn't get recorded, and obviously there's a load of other samples in there as well and demos, but you hear them and you're just like, it's just incredible. I listen to it and it makes you feel incredible. It makes you feel small at the same time, because you just realize that compared to Bob Dylan, you're sort of nothing really. You're never going to compare to the guy. He's just like this one-off talent that has defined generations beyond him. And people might talk about him musically and not being the most amazing musician, but it's about the whole package of him. And his voice is not the best, but it doesn't need to be. You know, it suits the music and it's what he's saying. And yeah, it's pretty incredible. You want to listen to the album, The Times Are Changing as well. Even now, like, given what we've gone through in the last year, you listen to some of the songs on there, like Pawn in Their Game, and it's stuff that still resonates now. You know, it's just incredible.
You know, we could continue this conversation about Bob Dylan for the whole series of.
Yeah, sorry, I know. I digress. I take up too much of your time.
Unfortunately, and I have so many other questions to ask you about Britpop as well, because I know you have a top five podcast with Andy.
Yeah.
So that's safe as a conversation for next month's festival. So do come back. Can you do that for me?
I'm happy to come on, and I'm sorry that I started talking about other stuff that wasn't podcast, but you got me going. I feel like there's a friendship we're gonna be best friends.
You're gonna be the one who's gonna inspire me to actually check out his entire catalog, because I love Bob Dylan after I heard Highway 61 Revisited, and it's a result of you naming a company after an album. You know, how cool is that? It's amazing.
Yeah, cool. Well, look, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it, the opportunity to talk. And as you can tell, I like to talk. So I guess I'm doing the right thing, right?
You have to come back, and I'm looking forward to see you again next month. Yeah, Garry Hayes, co-founder and director of podcast at Highway 61. Check out his cool podcast, all those music and Chelsea and NFL and all these amazing genres of podcasts I think that everyone in Asia would enjoy. So thank you once again. I'll see you, my friend.
Yeah, appreciate your time.
Bye. Jason, how are you?
Hi, man. How you doing?
I don't know. You know, for some reason, today has been pretty good mood. Yesterday I was stunned by the news of our good friend Hamlet, right?
Yeah. Very sad.
And I haven't even got the opportunity to properly grieve his passing yet. So just want to hear from you. You know, how did you react after you heard the news?
Well, I mean, kind of, I think, like great many other people, a terrible shock. I knew he was in hospital, but I didn't really think it through. I kind of feel a bit foolish because I heard he was in hospital, but I hadn't really thought if he's in hospital, it must be pretty serious. Such a nice guy, so incredibly intelligent, very generous, very kind. I did a few podcasts. I did a podcast, sorry, with him, and met him at a few conferences. Big hug is one word that comes into my head when I think of Hamlet. And, honestly, big hugs to everybody who knew him much better than I did. Obviously, I didn't know him particularly well, but love the guy, really appreciate the guy. And for people who are more affected directly by his passing than I am, my biggest hugs to you all.
And my memory of him, we spent one entire afternoon together at his Manhattan office. I think it's right next to Madison Square Garden.
Right.
And I went to his office and did an hour-long podcast recording with him in person. So that was something that was amazing to me. And during the episode recording, he dropped so many value bombs about entrepreneurial life, about being brave, in your journey, and to be courageous. He's an inspiration, not just in terms of the genius that he is, in his field in SEO, right? But how he looks at life, in fact, and how many people are now grieving because the kind of impact he has on everybody. I remember after recording the podcast, I was just expecting, to go back to my hotel and say goodbyes. And he took the trouble to take me out to an Italian restaurant. And it's one of those fantastic, restaurants in Manhattan that serve the best Italian food. And treating me like I'm a special guest, even though I look at him as he's my special guest. But the hospitality, right? I actually promised him that when he comes to Singapore, I'll make sure I'll roll the red carpet for him. And just 3 weeks ago, we were exchanging texts, just how we exchange texts sometimes on social media, asking him to come onto the festival and actually be here and to join us and to talk about podcasting, talk about SEO. And he was all for it, and I was ready to do it. And for some reason, it just didn't happen. And now I'm regretting the fact that I didn't push it harder, make sure that it happened, and maybe even a pre-meeting before this festival, and at least have a chance to know exactly what's happening to him, like health condition-wise. So I actually didn't know that he was in hospital. I didn't even know that he was in bad health.
I mean, I think kind of part of it was that he communicated with me because we were going to do a couple of webinars together. And he didn't make a big deal of it. He just said, I'm ill, I'm in hospital, so we'll have to postpone. So, I mean, kind of, he wasn't making a big deal of it. So kind of, it was difficult, I think. I'd like to think that I'm not as foolish as I thought I was. But obviously incredibly sad from a human point of view, from an intellectual point of view. And obviously his employees, his family, as you said, he was a great entrepreneur who was from the Dominican Republic, moved to America, became an American citizen only last year, and created a company. He has employees who obviously love and respect him a great deal, and a family. Lily Ray knows him incredibly well. So Lily Ray would be somebody who could probably express this entire situation better than I can. From my point of view, I'm simply saddened and shocked by the fact that somebody so kind and so involved in our community has been taken away.
And because we are both active in this medium, which is podcasting, we have actually our own collection of memories that are actually, archived in a podcast episode with show notes, with things that he said, with transcription.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. The podcast episode I did with Hamlet, I actually remember it really well because I didn't understand anything he said. He was talking about Google Collaborate, about which I know very little, and I was trying to sound like I understood what he was talking about. And I did the interview and listened to him, and he was just so far above my head that I didn't really understand. I understand the concepts, I understand the ideas. And that was kind of beautiful because he was talking to me and he obviously thought I really understood, which shows kind of that he thinks that the things that he thought were so simple were so incredibly complicated for the rest of us. And he didn't really necessarily always realize it. So that podcast episode sticks in my mind simply because it's the one podcast episode where I couldn't actually tell you what he said.
Such a great story. And I think all these conversations were recorded. So I'm sure that it will bring up all sorts of emotions if we replay it. So I'm not sure, have you replayed any of those episodes featuring him yet?
No, I haven't had the courage, to be honest.
Yeah, it's going to be very difficult. And I have actually tons of photos that we have taken together in the Italian restaurant. Yeah. I couldn't even bear to look at it because I know that if I open it up, it'll just open, the floodgates. And maybe kind of like being busy at this festival actually helps me, to actually focus on this right now. But I'm sure that the moment when I end broadcast, and go offline, right, I'll probably be looking at the pictures and looking at the tributes that people are putting up on social feeds, just for him. And then all these emotions will come back. So I'm kind of like prepping myself for that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, from your point of view, it is trite to say so, but keeping active at times when you're feeling sad about something like this is really good. And so having this podcast or this series that you're doing is probably helping you keep your head out of it until at least the weekend, but perhaps important to take the time to grieve properly.
Yeah, I think that's really, really important. So I'm just grateful that today you're here with me so that we can also have a chance to talk about our dear friend. So of course, we're inviting you here because you're a podcaster. It's a really kick-ass show. And of course, the last time we spoke, you actually brought so much great information about the really cracking it, in terms of making sure your podcast is able to rank well and your personal brand and everything, appears in search engine result pages, the right way. So what have you got for us today?
Well, yeah, I mean, since that last appearance, I've actually been contacted by multiple podcast hosts who are curious about how to make their podcast appear better in Google. Notably, if you look at the carousels that appear, if you search for best podcasts, there's a whole carousel at the top showing the podcasts that Google knows about, the podcasts that are in Google's knowledge graph. Some of them have got images, the podcast show artwork, and some of them don't. And so there's a big question now about how to get that artwork to appear in Google. Also a big question about how to get your podcast to appear in Google's carousels for podcasts on different topics. And I'm starting to research that. I'm collecting a list of podcasts. So if anybody out there has a list of podcasts that what I want is a varied list of podcasts so that I can put them into the CaliCube tracking tool and I can get some data. If I can get a list of 2,000 podcasts with their categories, I can track 2,000 podcasts and I can draw pretty quickly some decent conclusions about what we can expect as podcast people for our podcast entity in Google's results. So yeah, if anyone does have that, please do reach out to me because it would save me a lot of manual work. The idea being that today podcasts they're entities. If we come back to that concept, talking about Andrea Volpini and WordLift I work with on entity-based content models, the podcast is part of this entity-based content model. And podcasts are entities, but they're not entities that Google particularly recognizes very well yet. The Google podcast platform is likely to help to feed that much better. So as podcast owners, podcast hosts, podcast producers, we should start thinking about how we can present our podcast to Google's knowledge graph in order to leverage the best results in both Google results, but also things like Google Discover, which is this push technology where Google will push your podcast to its users that it thinks might be interested in your podcast without them actually having searched for your podcast. And that's very, very big news for us, because if you have a podcast about marketing, it can potentially push you towards people who are interested in marketing. If you've got a podcast about football, it can potentially push you towards football fans without them having made a search. And that, I think, is very, very powerful. For the podcasts who get in there first are going to get a big boost in visibility.
So you're with Jason Barnard podcast, right? You cover so many important topics, in the SEO and digital marketing world. So what have been some of the more interesting conversations that you have engaged with your guests in your recent podcasts that you publish? Maybe can you share some of your recent interesting topics that are top of mind, and maybe it will be something that will be great to share with our Asian-based audiences?
Yeah, well, I mean, I interview people on the basis of if they are terribly enthusiastic and really want to share what they know, then I'm very interested to listen. I mean, if we go back to Hamlet, he was just really enthusiastic to share. And I'm very enthusiastic to listen and to try to learn. In his case, it was try to learn rather than to learn. But somebody like Melinda Byerly was on recently about traditional marketing campaigns. I find that very interesting to see how traditional techniques and tactics and strategies work today in the digital world. And that idea that the digital world and the real world are not as far apart as we have had the tendency to think over the last 20 years or so. And that the marketing strategies we were using 20 years ago in the real world are actually becoming increasingly applicable in the digital world. I loved that conversation with her. I had a really nice conversation with Dave Davis, if we're going to talk about music, not the guitar player from the Kinks, but the digital marketing expert, Dave Davis, who calls himself the king of URL, the Duke of URL, the Duke of Earl, which I find terribly funny. He's a really, really, really nice chap. Very, very smart. Great one with Melissa Fash about content and Google's content updates, which I really, really enjoyed. She's a delightful person, all about content writing, how to approach that. That was brilliant. Next week, I've got Mike Blumenthal from Local SEO. He's going to be talking about review attributes, how review attributes are changing the world of local SEO. And by extension, because local SEO is often ahead of the rest of the SEO world, reviews and the attributes around those reviews are an incredibly important part of the future of how we're going to deal with proving our credibility to Google. We're talking about expertise, authority, and trust. I like to call it credibility because it's simpler to say. If you want to know about expertise, authority, and trust, you ask Lily Ray, who we mentioned earlier on. She's a real expert on that. A couple of podcast episodes with her from last year, which were absolutely brilliant. And as you said, in the New York offices, which sounds so cool.
Yeah. And all these guests that you are name dropping as well, Melissa Fash, right? Someone that we're familiar with from Popcorn, right?
Yeah.
I think obviously now she's with another company. So it's the guests that make the show really interesting. And do you have this, mantra of trying to bring as many, awesome or groundbreaking or innovative guests or most popular guests as possible onto your show? Is that, your modus operandi to each time bring even better guests to each episode?
Well, I don't think it can be better and better and better and better and better, because you end up with you can't always get better. I mean, there are always ups and downs, but what I do like is getting people who are enthusiastic. I think is phenomenally important. I've been guesting on a lot of podcasts recently, and I listen to the podcast that I'm going to be guesting on, and it strikes me a lot of guests are very monotonous and talk like this and don't really. The guy just before, whose name I can't remember, enthusiastic. That's what you want. You want somebody who's going to make you as a host feel dynamic, and they're going to bring that dynamism to the audience, because the guest speaks more than you do. So the guest is the one who drives the mood of the show, as it were. And a miserable guest or a monotonous guest is very difficult to deal with as a host, because you can't impose good humor on somebody who's just miserable if they are the star of the show, in inverted commas. And I actually had Mike Blumenthal. It was quite interesting. He just wrote me an email literally 20 minutes ago, because my design is I've got a thumbnail with the guest, a big photo of the guest, big title, and then I'm in red with my red shirt just at the bottom. And he said, why have you put yourself so far behind me? Why am I so big? And the answer is, one, because you're actually the star. I'm here to help you to share or to encourage you to share. We're obviously having a conversation, but it's more your conversation than my conversation because it's your topic. And the second is, and I sent him a screenshot of the YouTube channel. And when you see 6 of these lined up, if I was the same size as the guest in terms of photo, you would only see me. And because we've made me it's literally about half the size, maybe a third of the size, you see me every time, but I don't dominate. And I think that's an interesting point about kind of a podcast. The podcast is obviously centered around the person who's hosting it or the people who are hosting it. But the guests in each individual circumstance are the stars of the show, the person who is the most important. So today, I'm the star. And later on to next Tuesday with Mike, he's the star. And I think that's a nice way to look at it. I mean, star is a big word, obviously. But and the idea from my point of view, and I think it's the same for you, is to have a lovely conversation where we talk about things that other people will find useful, but within the context of a fun, interesting, enjoyable conversation.
100%. And I think you're a great guest. You're definitely not monotonous or miserable. And I love your trademark red color shirt. You know, that's like your brand, you know, and it's so easily recognizable wherever you go.
Yeah,
somebody else's show.
Did I tell you the story behind the red shirt?
Oh, yes, please. Oh, you haven't told me yet. Tell me the story.
Oh, it's a very silly story. It's actually quite funny because I play in a band. I play double bass and I sing. So I'm I'm actually a musician by trade. That was my first job, was being a musician. I was at a punk folk band and we played a version of the Ace of Spades. Here's a trick. Search for who played double bass on the Ace of Spades in Google. And you will get a feature snippet that says Jason Barnard. Who played the double bass?
Or double bass. Okay.
The double bass on the Ace of Spades. Obviously, the Ace of Spades is the Motorhead song. And if you search for that, if you search for who played the double bass on the Ace of Spades, it shows you Jason Barnard, because I played double bass on the Ace of Spades, the version made by my group called the Barking Dogs. Now, I discovered 3 or 4 weeks ago, if you search for who played the bass on the Ace of Spades, it now says Jason Barnard. So when you get a feature snippet, so the feature snippet has now forgotten that Lemmy played the bass on the Ace of Spades, and it now thinks I did. So this is an example. I mean, I talk about educating the knowledge graph, and I play tricks on it. And I try and see what I can do to influence the knowledge graph and feature snippets to show the information that I want about my personal brand or my brand, CaliCube. And this is an example of pushing things too far. I've gone so far that Google's now getting it wrong. But that wasn't the story. The story, in fact, is that I was playing in a band, and we had a concert like on a Saturday. And on the Friday evening, I was with a friend of mine, and I was cold, so he lent me a red shirt that, if you know Manu Chao from the Mano Negra, Mano Negra, very famous European French kind of Pogues type band who played Spanish influence kind of punk clay. It was like, you know, a Spanish group plays the Clash with lots of kind of folk influences. It was absolutely brilliant. They were an astonishingly good band. So if you haven't heard the Mano Negra, look them up, listen to what they did, because they were amazing. And he lent me the red Adidas jacket, which is what they wore. That was their kind of uniform, because I was cold. And at the end of the evening, I said to him, oh, I'd better give you this back, because I know Manu Chao gave it to you. That he had got it from Manu Chao, because Manu Chao had thrown it into the audience in the middle of a gig. This guy caught it, and it was his most prized possession in the whole world, this red kind of sporty Adidas top. And he said, no, keep it because you're cold. And I said, I know what I'll do. I'm playing a gig tomorrow evening. He loved our band. He was a fan of our band. I said, you're going to come to the gig. So what I can do is I can wear it for the first half of the gig. And halfway through the gig, I will throw it into the audience. And then you can catch it. And then you will have had the same red shirt from 2 of your musical heroes, Manu Chao and Jason Barnard. And he went, that's a great idea. That's fun. And somebody filmed the concert. And I threw the shirt in. He caught it. He was happy. It was really silly, very fun. And I was wearing a blue shirt underneath. And I looked at the video and I realized that wearing the red shirt, I looked interesting. Wearing the blue shirt, I looked boring. So from that day on, for the music, I've worn a red shirt every single concert. And now, obviously, within the digital marketing industry, it's come over there. Now I wear the red shirts all the time. And this is actually a red shirt that I had. I was at Chiang Mai SEO a year and a half ago, and I was a little bit drunk and wandering down the road, and I saw a tailor shop. And I thought, I know I'm going to get a handmade shirt made for my red shirt for going on stage. And I was one of those really good decisions you make when you're a little bit drunk. And I went in and I said to the guy, I want a shirt. And he said, okay. And he told me the price. And I said, in that case, I will have 3. And he said, okay, come back tomorrow and I'll have you 3 shirts made for you. And I went back and these are the 3. There are actually 3 exactly the same. The 3 identical shirts that I wear all the time. And so there you go. So that's the red shirt story of why I wear them. And the second one is good decision when a little bit drunk in Thailand, get 3 shirts made for. And I wore a polo shirt yesterday for an event that I was doing. And I didn't feel as intelligent and impressive. The shirt makes me feel, I don't know, it's a character. So this is actually a character you're now seeing. I become a new person. Sorry, go ahead.
It's a superhero costume.
Yeah, it's my Superman shirt. Brilliant, wonderful. So the red shirt is actually, and now it's become this branding thing, is that when I wear the red shirt, they go, oh yeah, the guy in the red shirt. And it's been working very well for me.
Since we are on the topic of superhero costume, how about what are your superhero stories? What ignited your passion about what you do? Which
I'll tell you a superhero.
Now as a podcaster.
Oh right, I'll tell you who for the double bass. My superhero is Jack Lemmon. Jack Lemmon, the actor from Some Like It Hot. If you watch him play the double bass in Some Like It Hot, he looks like he's having so much fun. I just thought, if he's having that much fun playing the double bass, I want to play the double bass too, because that's so cool. And he looks great, dressed up as a woman. He's brilliant. It's a genius role that he's got there. From a digital marketing perspective, the whole idea of doing brand SERPs and optimizing what appears when your audience searches your brand name or personal brand name or podcast name came from the fact that I wanted to control what they saw. I wanted to make sure that it was positive, accurate, and convincing. And I've managed to do that. And what I've found very surprising is that you can do it. You can actually control what comes up. And number 2 is 7 years after starting, I'm still working on it and it's still a lot of fun. So not only is it an ongoing task, but it's an ongoing task that is actually phenomenally interesting.
Amazing. And, we only have 3 minutes left. Can you believe it? Every time with you is always too short. And I have still a ton of other questions I want to ask. I think probably have to get you back on this festival again next month. I'm like using this as an excuse up with you,
Yeah,
and of course, I think this. Yeah,
I know you love talking about music, and we never actually get round to it. We talk about all the other things. I mean, the Dead Kennedys is your favorite topic with me. Dead Kennedys, Jello Biafra, that was my youth. And the Stray Cats, in fact, were one of my big favorites. I love the Stray Cats for some obscure reason. Brian Setzer is such a brilliant guitarist.
You like punk music, right? I want to ask you this question because it's related to what I'm going to maybe do an answer to you later on. Are you ever a fan of Nirvana, the grunge music era of Nirvana?
Yes,
do you
absolutely.
Nirvana songs with your band or your current band or whoever you jam with nowadays?
No, we didn't do Nirvana, but we did do, what's the name of the group? I can't remember. Hang on. Yeah. Give it to me, baby. Give it to me, baby. Pretty fly for a white guy.
Offspring. But no, I'm not interested in Offspring. I'm interested in Nirvana for one reason, because I'm going to do this is actually an idea that came up just a week ago. So my mates, right, who I recently started jamming with, because I play drums, and we decided to pay tribute to the late Kurt Cobain, his 27th death anniversary, which is coming up in April. So we decided to do a virtual event and basically get every band out there that cover Nirvana songs to either do it live, like using StreamYard, or they can submit their tapes or submit their MP4 video so that we can replay it during the festival. And it's gonna be another like 48-hour thing, like what I'm doing now with PodFest Asia. It's like
you're
constant
mad.
loop of cover bands doing Nirvana covers. So if you have a band or if you're a solo artist and you're covering any Nirvana song, I want you to be in the festival.
What's the date?
It's gonna be first week of April. So that's enough time for you to practice your double bass again.
Well, interesting enough, funny you should say that. I'm actually starting to make an album with a friend of mine where we're making it remotely. He's in the north of England. He plays the guitar tracks, he sends them through to me, and then I sing and play the bass over the top of it. We haven't planned to do any Nirvana songs. We're actually going to make an album. We're in the process of doing it. We haven't planned any Nirvana songs, but maybe I can find one. What would a suitable acoustic finger-picking Nirvana song be?
About a Girl, or just any track of Unplugged in New York by Nirvana. I think even Nirvana do cover songs. They covered David Bowie's The Man Who Sold the World. So that could be a good pick, even though it's a David Bowie song, but Nirvana covered it and actually made it better.
Right, okay. Well, the one you just mentioned before, what was the song you mentioned before?
About a Girl.
About a Girl. Oh, right, okay, because there's a song, Black Girl, which is actually a Leadbelly song, which is an old blues song that they did, which is incredibly well done by them. I'll have a think. Definitely worth thinking about. I don't promise that I can get Nig, who's the guy who plays the guitar, to do it, but if I can, I'll definitely do it. Brilliant stuff.
Fantastic. And I'll be eager to check out your rendition of Nirvana cover songs, because we have already got in touch with some, people who cover Nirvana songs. Some are doing it in the Hindustani recital style.
Wow.
So the amount of, incredible cover songs that were previously done by Nirvana is incredible. Like how they have taken the song to another level, or like completely dismantled it and reconstructed it, and so that it sounds completely different. So I think this festival will be interesting because we are able to use this festival format to put a spotlight on people who are still playing music, and that includes you. So I hope you'll be part of it.
Super. Yeah, I'd love to. I'll give that some thought. Definitely worth thinking about.
Fantastic. It's always a pleasure talking to you, Jason Barnard. So
Super
people,
duper.
CaliCube Marketing Podcast right below, and check out his conversations with awesome people and guests like Melissa Fash, just to name a few. So thank you so much, Jason. I'll see you next month. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Have a lovely time, Wayne.
Cheers. Hi, Garima. Are you there?
Yes, I am here. How are you?
I'm great. It's so great to see you. And
Likewise.
background, is that a real wall?
Oh, yes, that is a real wall. I can touch it.
I love that, the background, because it contrasts so well with your beautiful face. And of course,
thank you. It's very kind of you.
This is all part of dressing it up and making sure your podcast is also marketed well. Of course, sometimes people are always saying a podcast now is not just a brand, it's also a person. And you're the person who make these podcasts successful. Congratulations on the success of your podcast.
Thank you so much. Thank you. That's very kind of you, like I said. And congratulations to you for running a 2-day marathon of, having eminent speakers on PodFest Asia, and having people who are passionate about audio, talk in and give their expert advice. So I think it's great.
I'm so grateful that, you have such lovely comments for our festival. And of course, you've been also checking in on some of the guests who appeared on this festival. I'm sure maybe you have gained some takeaways as well. So I'm grateful that you're even tuning in and agreeing to do this together with me. So thanks to you.
Thank you.
So,
I think it's a mutual admiration society here. So I think it's great for both of us.
It is definitely a double win. Yeah. And of course, this is all about how the universe works, is to help one another, take care of each other, and elevate and lift others, right? So
yes, of course.
Formally introduce you, because I think for our guests, for your appearance on our festival for the first time, right, it means that we need to formally, introduce you the right way and tell everybody about what you do, because your name is Garima Surana. You're the host of PodFest with Garima, right? Which is an award-winning pop culture podcast. You're also the co-founder of PodFest, So that's really amazing, double role that you're doing for what you're doing in this podcasting space. Tell us, the story behind these two phenomenal brand names, Podcast with Garima and Podcast.
All right. So Popcast with Garima is a pop culture podcast. Essentially, the narrative behind the podcast is, it's a podcast that talks about the stereotypes and it talks about the taboos, especially for women. So my podcast is the pandemic baby, but I've been thinking about it for the last 2 years because, there's a lot of conditioning and there's a lot of, patriarchy still stemmed deep rooted in our society. And so we talk about issues which can create a discourse. The podcast is actually a reflection of our society, where we try to break the taboo for a better and equal tomorrow for everyone. We believe that, a discourse is the need of the hour and there are questions that matter and they need to be answered. So we talk about issues, like sexuality, toxic masculinity. We talk about women empowerment, and there have been phenomenal guests. These are all candid, unfiltered conversations. And for me, I think my podcast is not just, a tete-a-tete between two people. It's more about an audio experience. So the podcast is stitched in a way that it literally gives you an experience. There's conversation, there's music embedded in a playlist. Then, again, conversation. We also have listeners come in and talk. So it's got a very interactive vibe so that, you don't feel like you're just talking to the walls. And it's literally an experience that I try to create. And through these conversations, we're trying to build a community, with like-minded people. And that's the whole objective.
This is fantastic. And of course, we know that your Popcast with Garima is also an award-winning pop culture podcast. And you just successfully crossed 200,000 downloads for the first time recently, right? So,
Sorry, what?
Yeah, you just said that your aims to break the stereotypes and talks about the taboo stuff. So,
yes.
Well, ever since you started this podcast, have you ever ran into trouble with the authorities?
Oh, gladly, not at all. Even, but there have been people who have, in fact, we've made discourse in the right way. So there have been people, because we've started, educating them and indoctrinating them about, a lot of things about, right from patriotism, the right way to approach, any problem, mental health, wellness. It's a big umbrella that we cater. And I think rather than getting into any trouble or problem, people have come back and written to me that, how the podcast has empowered them, especially a lot of women. We talk about issues that women are not comfortable talking about. We talk about, sex and sexuality and female pleasure and all of these things, which is not really considered, something that is talkable in the Indian diaspora. And we're trying to change that. So it's not landed me in any trouble as of yet, but yes, we've been very lucky to have 200,000 listeners, and it's a great community, like I said, that we're trying to build. I've finished my 2 seasons very successfully, and I'm working on my 3rd one, which is totally dedicated to women. The season is titled "Empower Her," which is wordplay on empower. So we're trying to empower women. It's again, break through women from different genres of content, and I think it's great. And just to break it here, we haven't officially announced it, but this is something very exclusive. The season 3 of Popcast with Garima is actually in association with the UN Women. And this is something very big because, for an organization like UN Women to put their trust in a podcast, and it empowers me to empower women, who can listen to the podcast and feel inspired.
I'm even feeling inspired by this piece of news because it just shows that the power of a podcast, especially when it has really high content value, right? And I'm sure that you're bringing, super high content value because your podcast has been called a breakthrough podcast for South Asian women across your national dailies in India, right? So I'm actually thinking that it's fully deserved that you have UN Women coming on board as well to recognize for a job well done. So kudos to you and your team. Maybe can you tell us, how did you discover while doing podcasting, right, that brand collaborations, even this collaboration with UN Women, for example, why is this kind of collaboration beneficial, and why must also a brand or organization invest in a podcast?
Wayne, I was very clear right from the start that when I, when I actually, get into podcasting, I did not want it to be a mediocre job. I was very sure. I was very clear with my thoughts of how I want to go about it. So, people just say that my podcast talks about everything. We discuss about everything under the sun. I think that's a very wrong approach. For me, I started with making a 10-slide presentation for my podcast, actually. I knew that these are the brands I want to have. These are the guests I want to call. These are the topics I want to cater. So it was a very focused approach. And because I had a very focused approach from the beginning, I knew that, my content fits to these and these brands. And I was able to work backwards with these brands. In a short span of 9 months, my podcast, like I said, is a pandemic baby. It only started in March. And within a short span of 9 months, we've been able to work with 5 brands. We've been able to monetize our podcast, which is not really, because in India the podcasting is still at a very nascent stage. We're barely scratching the surface, and there's so much to learn and explore podcasting as a medium. And I think for brands, it's such a value add proposition to have somebody, to have a listener. You can literally go between, your brand can literally go between somebody's ears. Like, what more do you want? So yes, we did work with a couple of brands. We're trying to educate brands also, as we speak about podcasting, because with video, it's very easy, to show a product and to unbox and to give you a feel of the product. But with audio, creating that experience and telling the brand, the why and the how of your brand, which nobody ever goes on a website and reads the why and the about section. It's very important that somebody can give them that much of a platform to talk about the why and the how of the brand. So that's what we're doing.
This is amazing. And of course, there are also many Indian podcast startups, right, which are starting to grab attention, not just in India, but across Asia or even around the world. We heard about headphone, vernacular platform, awas.com, and directory platform, Hubhopper, right? So can you maybe introduce to those who are unfamiliar with these startups that are grabbing attention in India? Tell us what they are, who they are, and how do they also benefit your podcast?
Sure. So I'm actually hosted with Hubhopper right now. So I use Hubhopper Studio, which is an Indian alternate to Anchor, and I think it's doing great. Awas.com is India's biggest directory for regional content because it's very big. They recently started making podcasts in Urdu. I think they're available in Hindi, Marathi, if I'm not wrong, Tamil and Kannada, and they recently forayed into Urdu also as a language. So I think they have a great library of content in regional languages. Headphone, again, there are more platforms like Kuku FM, which is again very big on regional, because we have a lot of languages here, and every 10 kilometers the language changes, right? So I think it's only, and surprisingly, when we look at the statistics, podcasts that are actually in Tamil or Telugu are the most highest performing podcasts in terms of listener base. So I think it's very good to capitalize on these statistics and have platforms. The more platforms like Khabri, which is again focusing on making their own library of podcasts. So I think it's a very interesting space right now in India, because there's a lot of content consolidation happening. There's a lot of content proliferation happening because there are diverse range of it's not just about self-help or motivation anymore. We're seeing rise in true crime, we're seeing rise in sports content, we're seeing rise in content about wellness and mental health, which is big. We're also seeing a huge rise in religious content. So I think it's a very, very exciting space to be in. And of course, with podcast having an early movers advantage, and because with my podcast, we've been able to have case studies where we were able to tell brands that they have to forget the concept of virality and know more about brand resonance, and believe in that. So I think that's going really great.
And this consolidation, acquisition, all these investment deals that are being announced like almost on a weekly basis these days, right? Doesn't just happen in America, but in Asia actually. And you mentioned about all these great startups and the potential that they actually have in terms of really growing, really inviting a lot of investment interest as well. Just like in Asia, in this part of the world, right? Recently, in fact, the news just came out this morning. Taiwan's biggest podcast platform, SoundOn, was actually acquired by a Singapore-based investment firm.
I did see that. Yeah. Yes, it's
so interesting to see all these VC actions and investing in podcasting platforms, not just locally but overseas across cities and countries in Asia.
I think India, because of the virtue of population that we have, I think it's the second biggest market, and it's incredible how with the pandemic, how podcast growth have been accelerated so much. So of course there's big tech, which is your Spotify and Amazon, and them acquiring companies like Megaphone, Anchor. But there are also smaller players. So like I said, there's a lot of consolidation happening. We're just at the cusp of all of this amazing thing. And I think 2021 and the coming decade will be witnessing a massive growth in terms of revenues for podcasting, and content, of course. So it's a great time to launch podcast and enable the creator economy.
What about your other venture, Podcash? Are you excited by all these news that you're getting? And we know that Podcash is India's first marketplace for podcasters, advertisers, and guests. Is that right?
Yes. So Podcash essentially, came from. I'll tell you the story how it actually happened, and I'll be very quick with it. So, when I started monetizing my content, a lot of my fellow podcaster friends reached out and they said, we've been podcasting for 2-3 years and we've still not been able to crack brands. And, and how are you doing it? What emails are you writing? Who are the people you are approaching? And I tried helping 2-3 of my friends, but the number doubled. And it was not practically possible for me to help everybody, right? And which is why we thought that there is a bridge that I see here, because the content and podcasting is growing so much. I mean, only in pandemic there have been so many podcasts which have been launched. So I clearly saw a gap, and I thought it was the best time to bridge. And like I said, it's an early movers advantage. We're right now exactly where YouTube or Instagram was probably 5 years ago, 5 to 6 years ago, when they just started monetizing their content. And right now, I think we're exactly on the same stage, and it will just translate into the same history all over again. So it's great to enable and empower the creators, because any platform is because of its creators. So it's great that podcasting is not just a side hobby or a passion to people, but is also a sustainable business opportunity for them.
I think one of the listeners or one of your fans commenting, Ronit Roy, way to go, Garima. The conversations you are enabling are empowering for all. So I think you have many followers because you have 200,000 downloads, which is an incredible feat, for a podcast show in India. So, we want to actually ask you a few more questions before we let you go. One of those will be, in terms of your predictions as well for Indian market, especially, in the podcasting realm in India, which is an area which I'm familiar with, and I'm just so glad that you can come onto the show and actually tell us and educate us, about the landscape in India right now in the podcasting space. What are the other observations or interesting news coming out from that region?
Like I said, consolidation is happening, and audio, I think it's the closest to frictionless human-computer interaction that can happen, and it's the adoption of podcasting in audio, especially, is going to be great. As a format, I think it's very, very interesting. But other than the trends, if I have to predict something, I think big players will continue to be there. However, smaller platforms, there'll be more alternatives to tools, I think, to better your recording, to more equipments, I think, that will be able to facilitate a better recording experience, and tools like Descript and Otter and these editing and transcribing tools will go really big, I think, because that will be the need once there are enough and more podcasts. So I think more tools and more content coming together will be definitely that we will expect in 2021.
Great sharing, and we are excited too because India is part of Asia, and India is now the second top podcast markets in Asia. I know in the world actually. It's actually the top 10, number 2, I think, ranked in terms of the those markets in the podcasting realm. And of course, in terms of adults who listen every week to podcasts, right? The ones that are actually growing at the most rapid rate is actually India, number 1 again. So it's driving so much growth in terms of podcasting industry. And, do you think that India can also be a advantage, or should I say advantage to reach the rest of Asia, as in companies that maybe invest in podcast shows or podcast platforms, for example, right? They can actually enter India to Asia, the rest of Asia, through India. Is that what a viewpoint that you think is correct?
I think it's. I think we're pretty much there. Like I said, we're still scratching the surface. There's so much more to be explored. But you're not right. You're not wrong in predicting that. We will definitely emerge as a big market, and there's estimation already about the revenue going 10x bigger in this year alone. As per the PwC reports that we've been reading. So there's a lot of scope for sure.
How about the podcast shows in India right now? Are there any shows that caught your attention? I mean, obviously, a podcast Garima is one of those top shows. Are there any other shows that you would like to plug?
I think there are these cult shows in India which have been the veterans in the podcasting space. I think I would especially like to mention a podcast that I listen to, which is Advertising is Dead. It's a podcast by Varun Duggirala. I think he calls veterans from the industry and talks about. I think it's a very catchy name, Advertising is Dead, because it immediately catches your attention. Another podcast that has been there in India and is also a veteran podcast is Made in India, which again gives you a musical experience. With the bands and the studio production that it has, it's amazing. Another podcast, not essentially Indian, but there's another podcast that I really like listening to, is by is called Shameless Sex. There's another one called Chusky Pop. So I think these podcasts are doing great.
Do you also find these recommended podcast shows in India, which are basically chart toppers as well, right? Do you think they are also having a very great geographic appeal, which isn't just limited to India? Do you think they have actually great potential for global appeal as well?
Of course, definitely. I think for 10 years, we've been sitting on this golden egg called podcasting, and only this year has been the breakthrough year. So I think if slowly and steadily we are evolving and moving towards making Indian content global for sure. I think there's another podcast called The Three Things, which definitely, I think it's by News Laundry or Indian Express, I'm not too sure, one of these media houses. And I think that's a great podcast, and that's also been there for quite some time now.
Another thing that I observe is that the global top 10 podcasts on Apple is dominated by shows like the Gary V, audio experience, the Tim Ferriss show, or Wondery Business Wars. How long do you think it would take for an Asian podcast to crack the top 10?
Like I said, we're not far away from there. Indian Noir is a great podcast. Nikesh Murli is doing a great job. I think Sonia was there also on the panel sometime back, and he does great work even with Eyes of the Pandavas. It's such a brilliant audio experience that is there. So it's a quality which is unparalleled. So definitely with better quality, we're almost. I mean, we will be there soon. I think there's a lot of celebrityfication of podcasting going in India at the moment. There are more and more celebrities which are making their own podcasts. So I think definitely there is a lot of scope.
This is brilliant. So before we let you go, I'm just gonna squeeze in maybe one last question for you. So
Sure.
we know that your passion for podcasting is ignited, right, through various reasons. So what was your superhero story, and what ignited your passion for podcasting?
So I was always an audio person. I think back in college, I was a radio jockey for a community radio, and I think serving the people since the very beginning was something that I really liked doing. And if I could enable conversations, if I could enable women around me especially to be uplifted and to be inspired by the content that I create, because I mean, nothing against TikTok dances and all of those kind of content, but that's clearly not what I enjoy doing. So I think what I enjoy doing is talking about my experience. I come from a very small town in Rajasthan, and we've been conditioned to a lot of these stereotypes, which I try to break on the podcast. So podcasting for me is more like therapy, where I can vent out the years of things that I've learned, and now I'm trying to unlearn via my own podcast and with these amazing guests that I have on the show. These are essentially these are icons who are actually influencing the pop culture of today. And it's great to have a very rational, radical viewpoint about things and normalize a lot of these taboos. So it actually stems from a very personal journey. I think, having said that, audio has always been my passion. And like I said, I was conceiving Popcast as a concept for 2 years, but because I was caught up in the rut of a 9-to-5 job, and I mean, if I wanted to, like I said, if I wanted to take up podcasting seriously, I did not want to do a mediocre job. So I kept waiting patiently until I found my sweet spot. And pandemic, I think, was a great time to start the podcast. So yeah.
And it's not easy, to escape from the drug of a monthly salary and then to jump into podcasting. You are your own entrepreneur, right? So
it's definitely not. But when you get rewards like having completed 200,000 listeners, having worked with brands, coming on prestigious platform like yours, making podcasts, and we were also in the Apple charts, the top 50, among the top 50 podcasts. So I think when it's not always, a cakewalk or a rosy bed, but when these little things start coming your way, these little appreciation, when people tell you that they like your content and they listen to it and it makes them, feel empowered, I think there's nothing better than that.
Well said. I think your beautiful sharing is also inspiring to the rest of us in Asia. So I think we would love to see you come back to our festival more regularly. Hopefully, everybody can come back and update us, what are the other episodes that we should look forward to in your upcoming releases. So any last words for our audiences in Asia before we say goodbye?
I think I think anybody, who's still not started a podcast and is watching probably right now, I think it's a great time to start your podcast. Do not second guess yourself. This is the only advice I'd like to give everybody, that it's a great time, and don't just do it because you think, the profession is exploding with money. Do it because you have the passion to do it, because you want to tell stories that can really change the world, hopefully, because every voice counts and every opinion matters. So even in your little way, if you can go about changing world in the smallest ways possible, take that step. And I think it's a signal, it's universe's signal to tell you that start your podcast and don't second guess yourself.
Beautifully said. So that's a great way to sign off this program. And I think that also brings this festival to a wrap, because you're our last guest, and I've been actually 2 nights ago. This is the third.
I think you were saving the best for the last.
You have to save the last spot for you, Garima. Yeah.
That's too much narcissism, but yes.
What a great way to close up the show, to listen to your beautiful message of inspiration as well. So keep on doing keep on doing what you're doing successfully. And we look forward to hearing more outstanding podcast episodes from you.
Thank you so much, Wayne. And congratulations to you for successfully completing 2 days of constant, you've been on, I've seen the lives and I've been part of the sessions, and it's amazing. Kudos to you as well.
Thank you so much. You're the bottom of my heart. So I'll say goodbye to you and see you next month, hopefully. Yeah?
Yes,
Goodbye.
for sure. Thank you, Wayne. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.